to 2023. Good riddance. No, I'm kidding, actually. Compared to where we're going, this might be the last good year in human history. Who knows? Welcome to the Optimism Show. My name is Nick Dagan Best. I am an astrologer. His name is Patrick Watson. He is also an astrologer. And we're back. We're going to start with an ending. We're going to the show with the last day of 2023 and looking into the transits of 2024, a forecast, a bona fide astrology forecast episode. How you doing, Watson?
I'm doing well. And, it's actually not just the beginning of a new year, but this is also the first official episode of what we are now calling the Astrology
Livestream.
Before, we had just been doing these sort of casual astrology live streams. We didn't really have a name. So we are now kind of moving out of our garage punk rock band phase and now entering into our corporate sellout phase. And just kidding.
That's right. Nope, that's right. That's right.
Just kidding. And so we are now, we're now officially the Astrology live stream, and you can actually visit our website at theastrologylivestream.com. You can also get there just by typing in Astrology Livestream. All of our new videos will be on our new YouTube channel, so you should subscribe to that, and that is youtube.com/
the Astrology
live stream. And we even have a Patreon where you can support us in making the show and have access to some cool benefits to some other tiers that we created for engaging with the show. And so you can find that at patreon.com/ the Astrology live stream. So we're still kind of developing all of this stuff, but basically some of our basic infrastructure is now here. So this is the first episode in a way, and we do still have our old live streams on the YouTube channel. But from now on,
we're doing everything here.
Yeah. So you have one place to go now to go see
one-stop shop. Yeah, fantastic. You've been working very hard setting up the website and everything. So thank you for doing that. It has been quite the. For those of you who've been following us for a while, we were going to do an episode on Napoleon, like a month ago? And then that got postponed twice. And then we just, eventually we're like, okay, Mercury retrograde is obviously demanding that we sort of clean up house, tidy stuff up before we, really try to do anything moving forward. And so that's what we've been doing, sort of setting up the back end of our operation. I've also personally just been very hard at work on my database, getting ready to launch launch it on my website. I have been selling a package of 3 files from my website on Chris Brennan's Astrology podcast website, but that will be changing soon. And that price, if you want that package, get it now, because the price is about to go up. So today or tomorrow may be the last day that we have it available on Chris's website at the Astrology Podcast. And then it's going to be available on my website for a considerable amount of money more. I'm not charging a king's ransom, but I'm charging what it's worth. And so, if you want it at the old price, at the 2023 price, act now, or you can give me more money next year, which is great too. So maybe don't act now. Well, wait till next year and you can give me more money. What am I saying? Have I lost my mind? Okay.
Have we plugged enough?
Have we plugged enough? I know.
Have we plugged enough? I mean, my deals on my website with the coupon code Happy Holidays 23. That ends as of tomorrow. So today is like the last day you can get 25% off all of my services. So you may want to take advantage of that. I think you have a similar thing going on.
I have a similar thing going on. He's given 25%. For some reason, I'm only giving 20. So we know what the better deal is. But nonetheless, yes, I am offering 20% off my 1-hour astrology consultations. using the promo code Solstice 2023, all caps for some reason when you do promo codes. So you're yelling at Solstice 2023.
Yeah, I have mine on my Twitter. Just check out my Twitter. I have it a bunch of times if you want to.
As do I. Rather shamelessly, just constant plugging this month, but that did help buy my family a TV set. So thank you all for and Christmas presents. My family didn't have to have lumps of coal in their stockings thanks to this promo. So thank you. All right.
Jupiter's direct, Mercury's beginning to station direct.
Oh yeah,
so
This is
a good time to move ahead with things.
It is. It is. That's kind of why we chose it. That was when we decided to just give up on December. We realized the moon was going to be in a crap position at this hour on Sundays until the 31st. And we're like, okay, that'll be the first show. The moon's in a nice place. Relatively speaking. It has just separated from a opposition to Saturn, but it is now applying to a trine to Jupiter. So that's all well and good. And even that Saturn right now is getting a square from Venus. So even that Saturn is sort of feeling a little rare love imposed on it. So yeah, it's a good day to kiss 2023 goodbye and move forward. So without further ado, let's see where I guess we start at the beginning of where everything began, or where everything is beginning on New Year's Day.
It was a very good place to start.
I'm
the movie.
I'm kind of predictable that way.
Right. So in January, do you want to bring up the transits?
Yeah, well, first we're just looking at what's going on tomorrow. Mercury's stationing direct on the 1st at 22 degrees Sagittarius. What's interesting about this is next December, Mercury is going to station retrograde at 22 degrees Sagittarius. So there's some reference point between this direct station and next year's retrograde station in Sagittarius. Something maybe thematically related. It's something we should revisit when we're doing the live stream next December. And
well, Mercury always picks up the baton, of the previous place where it went retrograde about a year prior.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see how that applies even in like my own life. When Mercury went retrograde in Capricorn at the end of last year, that happened in my 6th house, and I was dealing more with like illness in that time. And in this case, we were really afraid of illness becoming a bigger deal since Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde in Capricorn again. But it seems like all of our attempts to try to avoid illness actually paid off somewhat.
Well done.
We had some lucky breaks there. So there's sometimes when you freak yourself out too much about a given transit, you end up seemingly doing the things that would help potentially ameliorate its worst effects. You can learn things, I think, from transit to transit. And I wonder if that's maybe the ultimate purpose of these kind of close calls of Mercury going retrograde in the same place a year prior. Kind of gives you a second chance in some ways at nailing that lesson again.
Well, absolutely. Mercury retrograde transits always refer to each other, refer to past Mercury retrograde stations. It's this ongoing sort of conversation, if you will, or ongoing theme that runs every 3 months and sort of resurges and then disappears for a little while and then comes back again. And then there are other things. When we get around to April, the Mercury retrograde happening that month is really interesting insofar as it mirrors a retrograde of another planet. I won't spoil anything because we want to keep people riveted. What planet is it, Nick? What could you be talking about? Stay tuned. Keep watching. But when we get to April, I'll talk about the next Mercury retrograde and how that sort of figures and everything. Now, the other thing happening pretty early in January is the Pluto regress into Aquarius, just as it makes a conjunction to the Sun. Or as the Sun makes a conjunction to Pluto. We have Pluto making its ingress into the second of 3 ingresses into Aquarius. But this one's particularly interesting because now it is with the Sun. Last year when the sun was at 0 Aquarius, Pluto had not quite reached Aquarius yet. So this one has a bit more of a firm footing, I'd say, as an ingress than the little 6-week dabble that we had in 2023.
Well, because the beginning of the synodic cycle just happens to be coinciding with the entrance of the planet into the sign, so I can definitely, if this feels like it'll be much more of a beginning. Pluto isn't always visible all the time. Astrologically speaking.
Right.
But I do find that when it's conjunct the sun or opposite the sun, or when it's stationing direct or retrograde, those seem to be the times of the year where you see the things that are more distinctly Pluto-ish. So, there's there's a huge topic just by itself, but I think that it's safe to say that some of the major themes which people are associating with Pluto and Aquarius, I would expect for there to be some tantalizing headlines in the news of those days, probably revolving around things like biotechnologies or nuclear power, or or developments perhaps with AI and other decentralizing technologies or movements. And this day is also very interesting because we know that this has a close connection to the inauguration day in 2025, where the sun will be conjunct Pluto at early Aquarius. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, about this Sun-Pluto conjunction Aquarius is, although they're very close while they're in Aquarius, the actual Sun-Pluto conjunction itself happens at the last degree of Capricorn. So it will technically, by degree and minute, it is the final Sun-Pluto conjunction.
I thought I had that one. Okay. Yeah, but I thought I had the conjunction in there.
But it's so close to the beginning of the sign that it's easy to I wouldn't disconsider. I wouldn't
No, it's a good point. You're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right. I misspoke. I mean, in a sense that really the proper conjunction is actually next year. Ends at 0 Aquarius, right when the new president is being inaugurated. No, you're absolutely right. I thought I had the Sun Pluto conjunction in my timeline here, so I just kind of hopped over it. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, because you can see there, the sun would have made its conjunction to Pluto at 29 Capricorn, not at 0 Aquarius.
That also has some really interesting implications for the kind of person who might be in office at that time, because if the sun generally represents leaders and it happens to be in the 10th house at the time of the 2025 inauguration, then we know that the Sun-Pluto conjunction would say something about the nature and quality of the kind of leader who would be inaugurated, as well as the nature of the administration and the kinds of things they might be acting upon. And I would hope that we would have other examples of what's happened when the sun has been conjunct planets at different U.S. presidential inaugurations, but I don't think we have too many examples of that in action. The closest we might have is like a Sun-Pluto opposition, at the time of when Pluto was in Leo, but I don't think that it was ever close enough, or close as the Sun-Pluto conjunction will be in 2025. Now, I realize we're already jumping ahead to 2025 here. This is we have not gotten very far in 2024, and we're already kind of jumping ahead. But I think it's important to note that the dynamics of that Sun-Pluto conjunction in early Aquarius of this year, should have a close thematic connection to the themes and qualities and feelings of the time 1 year ahead, which obviously is has is kind of important in this place that I live, US. And I imagine where most of you are, but we may have some visitors as well from New Zealand too, and other places. And of course, you're in Canada. But
sure, but that's the same time zone. So
yeah.
And anything that happens, south of us has an immediate impact. So it's not like we're
for sure.
It's not like a border is anything other than a line on the map. Okay.
Right.
So yeah, with all this in mind, this is we're already off to a rousing start with 2024. moving along, just some of the other features of January. We have a Mercury-Mars conjunction. This is the third Mercury-Mars conjunction in a series, because with Mercury retrograde, we've had 3 hits of Mercury-Mars conjunctions, and this is the last one. Excuse me, and it's square the nodes. This is the kind of thing that January 27th, mark your calendars. You can definitely see. I tend to see something like this as being like a really mass protest, like a sort of a clash of 2 factions, in a political context. When planets are square the nodes, it tends to be, someone's like against the people, the masses. And so and Mercury Mars already have a kind of argumentative feature when they're combined in conjunction. So to my mind, this looks like, I mean, let's face it, we've already had a lot of people protesting in the streets, a variety of reasons, but this looks remarkable even relative to all that. That's what it looks like.
Well, since Mercury is the messenger and communications, then it would make sense that Mercury in a conjunction with Mars in Capricorn would be a time of potentially heightened divisiveness or acrimony or brawls, online. And sometimes Mercury-Mars, that can also have connotations of trickery that's designed to kind of exploit or take, from others. So I would think if these planets are like activated in your chart in a particular house that relates to like finances or possessions, then I might think this would be like successful robberies or successful hacking attempts, or to steal or to thieve. These are things which would be more prominent or maybe successful in this time frame, where Mercury is kind of getting this kind of empowerment from this exalted Mars, and to do things which are wrong, or that take a certain boldness or lack of care. So there's some somewhat negative possibilities here. On the other hand,
I mean, this conjunction is also trining a stationing Uranus stationing direct in Taurus. So there's kind of a complex picture here, but all of it looks volatile. And another sort of angle we might take with Mercury-Mars is Mercury is children. So like a Mercury-Mars square the nodes, do we have a children's protest? Do we have, a generational kind of divide happening in the streets of, whatever city, planet Earth? That's another sort of feature that comes to mind is maybe some kind of prominent story involving a child or children doing something sort of extraordinary, out of the ordinary, or being, somehow having an impact on the larger population.
When I think of Mars and Capricorn, I also think of things like the military, especially people who are maybe high up in the military, like generals. So basically Mercury conjoining Mars and Capricorn is like the microphone being handed to Mars and Capricorn. So it might be the case that we may see sort of higher military officials sort of speaking out, which would be unusual just in the sense that typically we don't expect these figures to do a lot of sort of big announcements. So it could be maybe leaks, from high military sources, or from confidential information potentially being sort of publicized or leaked. This could even make sense with like intrepid reporting, and gathering information from the sources of an exalted Mars. So like confidential information or high up information, or military secrets or something being kind of leaked or distributed. Those are some of the other associations that come to mind, especially given that we know eventually Mars and Mercury will be moving towards Pluto. So there could be repercussions of some of the disclosures potentially that sort of happen around this Mercury-Mars conjunction. So those are some of the other things that I think about when I see that aspect.
Indeed. And yeah, because we have this complex picture along with the Uranus station, it really does look like a volatile and notable day. Especially vis-a-vis the Mars Uranus conjunction that'll be coming later in the year, that I'm sure we'll touch on when the time comes.
Right.
Okay, so moving right along, there's wait a minute, that's not okay. That's something else. Mars conjunct Pluto in February. So continuing with our Pluto and Aquarius story, we just want to make a note of some of the other bodies that come in contact with Pluto. Mercury, of course, will meet up with Pluto earlier in February. And then by mid-February, we have this sequence of events where we basically have a triple conjunction of Venus, Mars, Pluto over a very short period of time in this second week of February. So it starts first with the Mars-Pluto conjunction, and then shortly after that, we get by the end of it, Venus conjuncts Mars at 6 degrees of Aquarius after having passed over Pluto itself. So, this sort of triple threat between February 14th and February 22nd.
Now, I have to say, Nick, isn't this a little familiar?
It does. It is familiar. Yes.
So this is very similar to the end of 2022, where
no, end of 2021.
No, pardon me, end of 21. Pardon me, into early 2022. That's correct.
Yes.
Where Venus was coming off of its retrograde in Capricorn and moving into a conjunction with Mars, and then both Venus and Mars conjoined Pluto in Capricorn. And what was so fascinating about that arrangement from that time was we saw these stories in the news regarding kind of unhealthy or toxic sorts of dynamics in relationships, breakups gone really wrong, and for example, not to get too deep into it, but I talked about this back in the February 2022 astrology podcast, actually, about how this was right after. This was after some of the news that had come out about the way Kanye West had been behaving towards his ex-wife, Kim Kardashian, and how he had bought a house right opposite hers and was generally, not taking the divorce very well, kind of having this really outrageous and sort of very charged public reaction and meltdown about this. And this sort of reminded a lot of people of the way that some people behave, when their hearts are broken and when they feel like they don't have much left to lose. Heartbreak can be, a very extreme emotion, isn't always very easy to navigate. And and in talking with clients from that time frame as well, there were some people who were involved in very very emotionally and romantically and erotically charged relationships, to the point of being kind of all consuming and kind of reaching into this more extreme place of them being potentially kind of unhealthy. Not to mention the conjunction of Venus and Mars in Capricorn from early 2022 coincided with when Russia began the hostilities against Ukraine officially. So we really saw that exchange from peace to war.
And I think the sorry to jump in.
No. Go ahead.
The Plutonian factor of that was, right in those first weeks of Russia's attack, it soon became evident that it wasn't going to be the slam dunk that everyone, all the pundits, anyone who knew anything about military affairs thought rightly that this would be a slam dunk for Russia because they outnumbered Ukraine in men and equipment. But in true Plutonian fashion, Pluto very often it represents these sort of David and Goliath type of situations. It's not necessarily going to be the Goliath that wins the battle. And that's what we saw, particularly right at this time, suddenly everyone had to rethink what they thought they knew about Russian military, competency and the Ukraine's chances in actually surviving this whole thing. So yeah,
If you skip ahead to March 3rd, 2022, just 2 days after the date you have highlighted there, that was when Russian forces seized a Ukrainian nuclear power plant and a fire broke out at that
right,
nuclear power plant, which obviously contains, those notions of Pluto as being this
sure,
planet of
good point.
nuclear
Yeah,
power and the extremes of how bad things can get. You do not want to mix right fire with nuclear power plants. That's pretty scary.
yeah.
So if we zoom ahead to 2024, when we get to this similar kind of alignment, you can see why we would have the suspicion that there are going to be some elements from early 2022 that kind of resurface in a big way, and so my first thoughts are kind of go to that like Mars conjunct Pluto, even just sort of archetypal, we know that relates to the potential for sort of profound dangers or profound risks. And the last time this happened, just in 2022, had a fire at a nuclear power plant. It's kind of thing you don't want to hear about and don't want to see that. And that's unfortunately what we're seeing with Mars moving on to Pluto and Aquarius. Of course, the fact that it's happening in an air sign could potentially reflect something about the nature of that kind of danger, that it's something which involves something in the air, or that is that it could contaminates air, or ruins the air, or something about something along those lines. I wish I could say more precisely,
Oh,
maybe if you were to dig deeper into the dignities, you can figure out exactly what kind of event it would be pointing to. But just that general correspondence to the early period of 2022, when the Ukrainian and Russian hostilities began, that's why I'd expect that to potentially come back. Now, unfortunately, we've had a bad track record with being able to predict an end to this thing, so I won't bother to say that this would mark an
oh,
end. But I do think
no,
it would
no, I
mark
don't.
some
Yeah,
resurgence, or escalation, most likely, of these of this story.
yeah.
With Ukraine.
I think things come to some, if not an end, some kind of real head a year later, in the spring of 25, when we have the Venus retrograde
Right.
in Aries and the
Yeah,
Saturn
yeah, yeah.
Neptune. That's for next year's forecast
Yeah.
episode. But one other thing I want to say about this Venus Mars, again, like sort of like foreshadowing, this Venus Mars conjunction at 6 degrees Aquarius. I want you to remember that degree later in this episode when we get around to talking about Mars's retrograde station at 6 Leo the following December, because again, we're connecting dots, we're connecting different periods of time, and whatever this Venus Mars conjunction is going to mean in February of 2024 probably relates thematically to that Mars retrograde, and whatever that, it will be an indicator for at the end of the year.
And you're saying that precisely because it happens opposite that
Yes,
degree. Yeah,
exactly.
gotcha.
Opposite that degree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so following that, just some quick views of later February going into March. The Sun makes a conjunction to Saturn and Mercury over this period in late February. Mercury will conjunct both Sun and Saturn before Sun and Saturn conjunct each other. So if you have planets or a birthday, right around this time, that sure loads in the Pisces, the forces of Pisces, in quite the extreme there. Should
Yeah.
someone's going to spike the punch at the birthday party, I presume, even if it's a kid's birthday party. Uh,
um yeah, I mean, when you think of Mercury and Saturn, um you think of sometimes the importance of things that aren't said. Also worth noting that both Mercury and Saturn at that point will be so close to the heart of the sun that there may be a lot associated with this transit which is not always public. It
mm,
might be hard to see. Those planets are literally being obscured by the sun. And Mercury, Saturn, that can relate to announcements which are about concealing, or perhaps about denying or rejecting certain theories, or it's about saying the word no. Saturn is kind of automatically put of
Yes.
contraction, and Mercury is, and so what Mercury is kind of saying is, no, this thing is not happening. It's denying, or shutting down, or otherwise sort of excluding
Right.
possibilities.
At the same time, there's a sextile to Jupiter, which rules Pisces. So
That's true.
there is something that, softening or optimistic amidst all this no. Like maybe it's a righteous no, or it's a no that has a lot of support. Like it's a lot of people saying no. Um, and then later in the month, the Sun, of course, will make its conjunction to Neptune in mid-March, on March 17th. So this looks like the St. Patrick's Day to end all St. Patrick's Days.
The ultimate, yeah. If you're gonna drink on a St. Patrick's Day, like, this is the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, first of all, for our Irish listeners, I apologize that you get roped in, because this is obviously, we're talking about what's really a North American holiday. Certainly, the Irish in Montreal live it up on March 17th, as do I've lived in New York, and St. Patrick's Day in New York City is just nuts, and I can only imagine what Boston's like. So yeah, I realize for our Irish listeners, it's got a sort of different connotation, and it's rather tiresome to always be associated with excessive drinking, especially when, I mean, are there any European countries where people aren't excessive drinkers? It's kind of unfair that it just gets leveled at Ireland. But anyway, all that being said, we know, certainly in North America, March 17th is a big drinkers' day. Even people who, don't necessarily let loose, this will be the day that they do. And since it's the Sun conjunct Neptune, I can just imagine that it's going to be a special one, if you know what I mean.
Well, I wouldn't think alcohol would necessarily be the only drug of choice here. When you get these major
sure.
polyps in Pisces, you often get, stories surrounding the decriminalization or distribution of things like THC, marijuana, cannabis products. We see Venus in there as well. So I would think, even not focusing on this particular date, I think it would, even just in March in general, that there could be sort of more news stories sort of surrounding maybe what's unknown in cannabis products. One of the kind of issues with cannabis products right now is it's hard to know how hard something's going to hit. The quality and potency can vary from product to product, and that's something that is kind of a consequence of the fact that it's been largely illegal for so long, that the kind of research and developments needed to be happen to make it a lot like other consumer products just hasn't happened. So I would wonder if there would be stories that are surrounding these substances that give us relief and enjoyment and merriment. But
well, when everyone's drunk on St. Patrick's Day, they'll also be stoned and tripping balls and mushrooms. I think that's it'll just be it'll just be like ingest everything day. Anyway, have a good time.
All those Saturn stats, there might not. It could be bad trips though too, right?
Party responsibly, folks. Party
yes,
responsibly.
Yeah.
Hey, have yourselves a good time, but not too good a time. Not such a good time that it's a bad time. Okay, well, yeah, I just wanted to mostly breeze through that. There's also in that same month, while we're at it, a Venus-Saturn conjunction in Pisces, just as the Sun leaves Pisces. So yeah, just this is maybe the hangover 4 days after St. Patrick's Day. The aspirin finally starts to work.
With Venus-Saturn, something I've kind of noticed with a few Venus-Saturn conjunctions is that there is just something I've kind of this is sort of not a personal anecdote, but just something I've kind of noticed around Venus-Saturn conjunctions, is that online you'll tend to see like photography spreads that are highlighting beauty, but in a kind of stock way. So like highlighting, so for example, there was a Venus-Saturn conjunction a few years ago, and there was this photo spread of like photos of breast cancer survivors.
Okay.
where there were these very stark depictions, very unfiltered, raw, beautiful in their own way, but very raw and very harsh, kind of photography, sort of showing combining both these qualities of
Mm.
of Venus, but also of Saturn, and
Right.
really combining this.
Right.
So I would think with Venus in its exalted sign, conjunct Saturn, that would be a lot of imagery around that time that kind of highlights both beauty, but in a kind of raw and unfiltered and
Right.
and like
Beau beauty with
heavy way.
gravitas. Beauty with
Yes, yeah,
gravitas. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well done.
So maybe that's the day to drop your dramatic selfie, that's
There you go.
um,
I'm dropping
so
dramatic selfies all the time. Okay, and that leads us into eclipse season. The first of 4 eclipses of the year occurs in late March. It's a lunar eclipse at 4 or 5 degrees. For some reason, Solar Fire gave me a fourth. Not quite an exact looking eclipse, but it should be an exact eclipse. Maybe half an hour later. Not sure what went wrong there, but yeah, this is a lunar eclipse at 5 degrees of Libra. And that is followed by this bad boy, the total solar eclipse on April 8th of sun moon at 19 Aries. So this is a powerful one, and the strongest one of the year. And there's a lot of other stuff going on. For some reason I had a Mercury station retrograde. Mercury stationed retrograde on the 1st of April, a week before it stations retrograde on, and I was supposed to have that chart saved, but something went wrong and it's not in my file here. But this eclipse is going to have Mercury station retrograde, or Mercury retrograde, alongside it, and an impending Mars-Saturn conjunction. So the environment for this particular eclipse is, I think it brings up some old business. This is the Mercury retrograde I wanted to talk about. Actually, it's a real drag that chart didn't save. Let me quickly do that. Mercury station retrograde at 27 Aries on April 1st, 2024. I don't know what time, but I'll just do this because this is something I wanted to show. This is what I was hinting at earlier, the next Mercury retrograde before this eclipse. Mercury stations retrograde at 27 Aries on April 1st, 2024. And what's interesting to me, it's going to station direct at 15 Aries later in the month. But this is the exact path of Mars's retrograde in 2020. Between September and November of 2020, Mars went retrograde from 27 Aries to 15 Aries. And this was the Mars retrograde leading up to the 2020 election and sort of all the craziness going on around then.
Wait a second. Oh, I think I know what this could be about then.
Okay, all right.
Because there was the solar eclipse at 29 Aries this past spring, and that was at 29 Aries. So that's like really close to where that Mercury stationing. And we know that what happened on that day on that solar eclipse at 29 Aries was when Fox News basically decided to settle in the lawsuit that
okay. Oh, nice.
And that led to the ousting of Tucker Carlson. So that came directly from everything that happened around the 2020 election, where Fox News decided to perpetuate these falsehoods about the count and everything. And so knowing that we'll have another solar eclipse in like Tucker Carlson's 10th house, and
Tucker's natal Venus. Tucker's a red one, born just after Venus station directing, has Venus at 15 Aries, which is where the direct station of Mercury is going to be in April of 2024. And it's also where the Mars direct station in Aries was in November of 2020, as the whole election was happening.
So you can see. So I mean, so basically, if the solar eclipse in his 10th house from this past spring, got him demoted from Fox News, then I would think that this next eclipse happening in a similar part of his chart would probably, for whatever reason, bring him back into the conversation in some big respect. Now, I obviously, from what I've said, you can tell I'm not like a Tucker Carlson fan here or anything. So I'm not saying this
No,
from some
no,
place of
not
like
yeah.
admiration or something. Like,
Neither am I. But if we're talking about
who's
Tucker
going to show
Carlson,
up?
yeah, if we're talking
Right,
about Tucker Carlson's chart, then we're talking about it from his perspective and what he thinks are
right,
good and bad things, and not necessarily, our opinions aren't really relevant here. So,
right, right.
we're going to talk about people we don't care for, but if we're talking about their horoscope, we're talking about how they see the world.
So,
Um, yeah, but I'm inclined to think like he does seem to be doing okay on his own, despite some,
right.
uh, uh, um, some embarrassing sort of, glitches on his way back up the greasy pole. But yeah, I think this does sort of, he's likely to come back into the conversation alongside everyone else who's sort of dealing with, who's still living in 2020. Let's put it that way.
Well, for
So
example,
if you're
with
still living
Mercury
in
going
20,
retrograde through its 10th house, and if this is like resurfacing, news from late 2020, then I would assume this could be a time when he maybe, I don't know if he's like planning a memoir or something, or writing a book about like what actually happened or something. But I would think it would be like when he really kind of speaks out and tells his side of the story potentially. It's like when we get kind of Mercury retrograde going back through those degrees is like digging up the kind of gossip or
right.
inside information from that time frame, and kind of digging it back up and going, here you go, like here's some stuff that happened in that time that you didn't know about, now you do. Another important thing to note about that period, where Mars was retrograde leading up to the 2020 election, this is something that I had said before it happened, and that actually was validated later, which is I said that because Mars in Aries like represents soldiers and the military in general, that you would have a situation where like maybe generals would revolt, or like generals would not do as they're told, because Mars was going retrograde through the sign of Aries. And it turned out that when in the lead up to the 2020 election was when Trump was telling his generals like to potentially prepare to launch military force to be used against protesters, again, who protest
Right.
the election. They basically push back against that, and more or less
Refused.
weren't going to do that,
Right.
and so while it wasn't publicized at the time, that later came out that that was kind of happening at the time. So that again makes me wonder if this would be a continuation of the conversation perhaps that is started at that final Mercury-Mars conjunction, and that maybe Mercury going retrograde in the sign of Mars would sort of further this idea of communications from the sort of Aries sectors of society, the soldiers or generals or military that kind of end up becoming the thing that people are talking about, the main stories that are being discussed and commented on and shared, or kind of circling around those sort of disclosures. So it's there's a lot of possibilities
Right.
there,
Right.
but that's kind of what my mind goes to.
Yeah, well, you can see here Mercury stations direct at 15 Aries on the 25th of April, and when it does so, it's conjunct the North Node. So it's amplified. When a planet's conjunct the North Node, it's kind of like it's going through a Marshall stack. It's louder. It's more sort of in your face. And since that's the degree of Carson's Venus in the 10th house, yeah, this probably towards the end of the Mercury retrograde more than any number of things relating to that period in 2020, relating to the Mars retrograde that preceded this, will surface over the course of the month. But I think like insofar as Tucker's involved, probably sort of towards the end of the month. Yeah, it could be the publication of a memoir, or it could be like a really big interview, big just profile. His name's just in the news because of something he said, uh, which is
Well, and this is
entirely imaginable, like entirely feasible that he says
and
something.
this is somewhat to be expected because of because this began for him when the solar eclipses like started occurring in his 10th. We know that
Mm,
when you get that first eclipse that happens in a new sign, that often kicks off kind of a series of
right.
eclipses that
That's a good
together kind of
point.
create
Yeah.
this story about something about his 10th house. It's not just about the end of his era at Fox News. It's about whatever this kind of new chapter of his life is going to be about, and potentially more significant for him, especially given that Uranus eventually gets to his son in Gemini. But again, that's a later story.
No, his son's in Taurus.
Pardon me.
But understood.
Mercury, I guess, is the planet I was thinking of.
Right. So alongside all of this, at the same time that Mercury's stationing direct, we get the fabled Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on April 20th. Happy birthday, Hitler. Happy 420 day for stoners.
It's great for stoners and drinkers this year, right?
It's all
Neptune
about the stoners and drinkers.
On St. Patrick's Day, Jupiter-Uranus on 420. Wow.
It's 2024 is going to be such an intensely depressing year that I think we all want to be drunk and stoned the entire time. No, not really.
Right.
I shouldn't even joke about that, although it's partly true. It's certainly daunting. I don't know how terrible it's going to be, but it's going to be, we obviously in an election year like this, we expect a lot of turmoil and,
one of the interesting things I think, one of the things to note, I think, about this time is just noting that Mars and Saturn are acting together while Jupiter is going through this kind of extreme or extraordinary liberation. So there's like two parallel stories that are happening at the same time, and they may not necessarily be related to each other, but it's like at the same time that
they could be. There's a sextile,
There is a sextile. I guess we can't discount the possibility it could be connected, but there's one way in which we're dealing with kind of a really nasty bad problem at the same time that there's some miraculous kind of opportunity that materializes as Jupiter goes as Jupiter conjoins Uranus. I've spoken about this aspect before, but one of the things that's kind of almost scheduled to happen that makes a lot of sense is we know that some of the greatest periods of volatility for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have occurred as Uranus moved into Taurus back in 2018, and we know that the eclipses that occurred conjunct or opposed to Uranus in 2021 and 2022, and in 2022 mainly, we had these major moments of collapse for cryptocurrencies. We had the FTX collapse. We had the Terra and Luna stablecoin collapse of the spring in the eclipse season of 2022. So the fact that we have Jupiter conjunct Uranus is really interesting because it would suggest that some of these problems with this volatile innovation in finance, like cryptocurrency, that this is something which will be kind of remedied or improved upon. Jupiter, when Jupiter conjoins something, there's often the sense of, or not just the sense of, but a situation where the legal authorities make a declaration or judges decide. Jupiter is often a representative of judges or judge-like figures. So having Jupiter conjoin Uranus is like Jupiter giving its stamp of approval and confirmation to this technology. And what's interesting about that is currently, I don't know what's happened with this case since, but I know that there's currently, I think there's currently a court case going on where the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission in the United States, is trying to decide. They want to say that that cryptocurrencies are the same thing as securities rather than currencies, and depending on how the courts decide, that could really change how much cryptocurrencies are worth in the future. So the fact that Jupiter is conjoining Uranus, it's giving it stamp of approval to the novel, innovative thing. That makes me think that they may lose that argument, and that that cryptocurrency would then flourish, as a result of, or reach some new kind of peak in that time as Jupiter kind of gives its blessing, to this Uranian, innovative impulse in a financial field. And it's really interesting because it just so happens that the next halving event for the Bitcoin cryptocurrency is currently scheduled to happen in April. And about 6 to 18 months after a halving event is usually when you see the price of Bitcoin reach a new incredible high, and that's just kind of hard coded into the structure of the coin. So I think it will be very, very interesting to see what happens with that development, because it would seem to suggest that either it blows up at that time, or that people who buy in at that time end up being able to profit later. It seems to suggest this moment is sort of pregnant with the possibility of kind of explosive and unbounded growth in a financial area, or when the government sort of gives its tacit approval to these things. And we know that this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that's occurred in Taurus before, that coincides with I think we talked about this before. I forget the exact story, but I think we were able to connect it to the development of Fort Knox and how the government at that time wanted to get the gold that everyone owned. And it would be very interesting to see if the United States decides that it needs to start stockpiling cryptocurrency as a kind of backup or something. It will be really interesting to see how Jupiter gives its blessing to that. I don't want to get us distracted in the in the details that we discussed this on a past live stream, but basically that's one of the kind of main strains I'm kind of expecting to see with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, is that it'll be about kind of judicial or legal approval and endorsement of this kind of financial innovation, and that this could lead to kind of unbounded growth in that asset class.
Right. I'm reminded that, just on another note entirely, when Jupiter and Uranus were last conjunct in 1941, the last time they were conjunct in Taurus was in 1941. And this was this whole time of like when the US was not involved in the Second World War, but they were supplying Britain with, weapons, really sort of old weapons that they had no use for, in exchange for control of a lot of British bases in the Caribbean and things like that. Elsewhere, so the beginning of the United States taking over for Britain as the global superpower really begins in 1941 with that last conjunction. So I'm also just sort of interested in the relationship between the United States and Britain during this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and if something sort of interestingly transactional arises around this time between them.
That's fascinating. The other major thing that I think of when I see that Uranus conjunction is, we know Uranus can sometimes represent technologies in general. Mm-hmm. And so, there's that whole chapter in Cosmos and Psyche where Richard Tarnas outlines all of these kind of technological breakthroughs that have coincided with past Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions and Jupiter-Uranus alignments. And I think one of the ways you actually made me aware of this is how in the life of Steve Jobs,
right,
he was born with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and at subsequent Jupiter-Uranus oppositions and conjunctions, you had all these developments in Apple, the creation of Apple, and the development of some of their major products. And at the last Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in 2010, I believe that coincided with the release of the iPad. So I think that another possibility of April 2010 is that we get a kind of new device that is announced. Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be Apple. In fact, my bet would probably be from Meta and Zuckerberg, because Zuckerberg has his son pretty close to that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. I think there's also been talk from OpenAI that they may be actually releasing the first sort of AI integrated device, like a ChatGPT device. So that would be, again, very interesting if that potential development for like a new technological breakthrough of some sort occurs around the time of this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction from a major tech company, perhaps like Apple or perhaps like Meta.
Right, right. Yeah, good call. Chris and Austin touched on the sort of the technical innovation
Mhm.
aspect of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction when they did their forecast. So they did a really great, thorough breakdown. I don't think we need to sort of,
Sure.
pile on top of what they said, which was quite complete. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's one of the things that'll make 2024 sort of a landmark year is how it changes our life with regard to some new technology, probably substantial.
What do you make
Okay,
of Mars-Saturn in Pisces?
yeah, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
I,
So I
I,
mean, a rush you.
some of these that I made charts for that didn't get saved, even though I know I saved them. So Solar Fire did something weird to me. So yeah, because here I have Mars conjunct Neptune, but that's the conjunction has already happened. I know I made a conjunction for Mars conjunct Saturn. Yeah, it just didn't save it. Damn, something weird happened when I was making all these charts, and it's
With Mercury retrograde square Neptune?
yeah,
No,
no, and
surely
there's
not.
a reason to it either. Like it saved some and didn't save others. Let me just remake this here quickly. Um, the hell is it? No, I can't even find
I mean, you
the
can always
thing I saved.
navigate to it. You can always just choose an event close to it and animate the chart
This
to
is really
display it.
irksome though, because if it's excluded a bunch of other things that I saved and presented here. Let me just quickly do this again. People who are interested in Solar Fire, they can watch me doing this and learn how it's done. And hopefully this doesn't crash my Solar Fire. No, good, it doesn't. Okay, whoops. I don't need 8-degree
Maybe
aspect.
some of those technological developments from April will involve new astrology
Gee,
software.
gee, I think. I wonder what that could
I
mean.
wonder who might be involved in things like that.
Crazy people
Crazy
who
people.
just crazy. Okay, here we are. So this is how I do the search. So this is the Mars Saturn conjunction that I was supposed to have there, and this is in the middle of everything else that we're talking about in April. It's just after the eclipse. That we were talking, that big solar eclipse at 19 Aries. It's in the midst of that Mercury retrograde that we've been talking about. It's just as Jupiter Uranus is about to happen. So yeah, in the midst of all this, we have that Mars Saturn conjunction in Pisces, and again sextile the stuff in Taurus, by sign, which I is no small feat because Jupiter rules Pisces, and so like that connection to the combo in Taurus is I see it as one sort of unit, if you know what I mean, and ultimately coming down to that Jupiter has the last word on whatever that conjunction means. So yeah, like a big solid no. We
Right.
absolutely confirmed that the answer is no. Um,
Mars-Saturn, um, Mars-Saturn conjunctions in Pisces. I talked about this in past live streams and even in my uh, my video I made about Saturn and Pisces, Thirst Trap, that Mars-Saturn alignments in Pisces have coincided with times of like watery disasters or the destruction of watery infrastructures, and um, so what that can look like sometimes is like the failure of like dams or bridges or
okay.
the problems of the problems of watery infrastructure and what can happen. And it's so funny because I even saw this happen in my own life, that Mars Saturn opposition this past July across Virgo and Pisces. The water on my street got shut off. There's
Okay.
no water. And knowing that Saturn and Pisces periods in general seem to be promoting this kind of growing awareness of water scarcity and access to water, makes me think that Mars conjunct Saturn and Pisces, maybe when some people are kind of driven to craft some sort of solution or workaround for these issues, for the contamination of water, or for the just for the scarcity of water, and
Right.
could even make sense for a time of like making new inroads into making new infrastructure projects. But in any case, it would seem to be addressing a big watery problem from that time.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's also touched my personal life in a few ways. Cape Town just had crazy fires that came very close to our house, my wife's property in Cape Town, and water. We went through a drought in Cape Town back in 2017, like a bona fide drought, and we were lucky to get rain at the last minute. But the reservoir was down to its last 10%. It was really, sort of frightening. You can fathom how close the world always is to sort of collapse. But speaking of hometowns, I'm also reminded another place with water problems, water infrastructure problems, and a place that natally has Mars and Saturn conjunct in
Oh
Pisces. It's
wow!
my hometown of Montreal. My beloved hometown of Montreal that is
I wouldn't
racked.
think a place in Canada would have water problems.
No, well, look, okay. I mean, without going into too much Montreal history, which is kind of
Sure,
contentious, it's a politically very volatile place. We've had two separation referendums, like sort of Brexit-ish sort of operations occur just in my lifetime. One when I was 11, and one when I was 27. In fact, my into to study astrology came a lot from that second referendum, because the politics were so everything was so sort of metaphysical, questions of national identity and these sort of very, it wasn't about infrastructure. What angered me at the age of 26, 27, what spurred me on to become an astrologer was the entire political discourse was completely focused on sort of metaphysical ideas, whereas the infrastructure was clearly crumbling. It always has been in really terrible condition, and
you were
always.
26 when that happened.
26 when that
That
happened.
means it was 1994, which was when Saturn was in Pisces.
Yeah, and Saturn, yes, that Saturn, it went into 95. The referendum was in 95, but that was also Saturn in Pisces. Yes, exactly. And here's the thing. Okay, so in what's her name, the Swedish the young Swedish activist, what's her name, Greta Thunberg.
Greta
Okay,
Thunberg, yeah.
so Greta Thunberg, and this is by no means a rant against her in any way, but she becomes a celebrity in 2019. She goes to the United Nations in September of 2019, and she gives a we all know what she does. She
Tans the hides.
yeah. Personally, I think it should be an annual event that we have a teenager berate the United Nations. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, that makes sense.
like once a year, bring in a teenager from somewhere on planet Earth to tell everyone what a bunch of screw ups they are. I
The
think
annual berating, yeah,
yes, I think it's a great idea.
that is a good idea.
However, that was followed by this big rally in Montreal, where Greta, spoke to a vast audience of people. Right there in the park, like basically a 5-minute walk from the hospital I was born in, and another 5-minute walk in the other direction from my childhood home, is where she did this. And that's all well and good. I'm in support of that, but I thought it was really crazy hypocritical for Montreal to be doing this, because Montreal has just been this wreck forever. And sure enough, a month later, in October of 2019, we find out that the water pipes in Montreal have more lead than the problem in Flint, and that a lot of people are have been drinking lead poisoned water, and that this problem could have been solved decades earlier, but because the instructions to fix the problem were in English, they were just sort of disregarded because they weren't provided in the French language. And so, if
Right.
anything's not provided in French, it can be ignored. And so, for decades and decades and decades, while people were fighting over sort of these, metaphysical political problems, the populace was literally being poisoned with water. So now,
Wow.
I was in Montreal earlier this year, and I know people who have to use these special sort of water filters if they dare drink their tap water.
Wow.
I mean, it's a shame because Montreal has a clean water reservoir, but if it's going through lead poison pipes,
Lead
that
pipe,
doesn't
yeah.
mean anything.
Well,
They
isn't lead the metal of Saturn? I mean, this literally seems to be right there in the chart of Montreal that, yeah, there would be water problems.
Yeah, yeah.
I almost thought from your response you were saying there wasn't any. But you're kinda confirming there was.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um,
okay.
Montreal might be in for something interesting with regard to its infrastructure. I mean, interesting. Like I find this, quite quite shocking. But the population seems to be taking it in stride. But I'm starting to wonder if it's a matter of time for like the reality to really sink in with regards to this, or if we don't start
Well
seeing some bigger pushback to it.
well, Mars tends to provoke action, so with Mars
Right.
conjunct Saturn, I would think that's when push comes to shove, literally.
Yeah.
Um, and, I would think that,
Whoops. Yeah. So back to this Mars Saturn conjunction. Yeah, you can
yes.
see it's yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see how that would, be, yeah, potentially significant. Another thing that is kind of interesting to think about is, I talked before on the live stream on the on the wilderness months of the live stream before it became the astrology live stream that when you look at Saturn in Pisces in terms of Joe Biden's chart, that it tends to coincide with times where he either was without a home, such as during the 90s, or when he like said goodbye to his parents and moved into a really small place in the
Oh,
60s.
interesting. Interesting.
And so Saturn, moving into his fourth house is obviously kind of a bad omen in some ways for him
Right.
being in the White House, right? Because that's a place directly
Yeah.
connected with his employment. And, so when we consider that, Biden has Sagittarius rising, that Mars Saturn conjunction will be happening in his fourth house, which would make me think like, on the one hand, that could be relevant for literally like the
The physical
security of the White
or
House.
or the physical structure of the White House,
Yeah, yeah, like,
um,
maybe this is when the pipes burst in the,
right.
the White
I
House
mean,
and there's, like,
like I know, like
sludge everywhere.
Truman spent a good part of his presidency with the White House being renovated, and he had to live across the street. I forget the name of the building that he lives in, another sort of government building. But yeah, Truman spent a lot of his presidency not living in the White House because it was being renovated. And then Jackie Kennedy, of course, also renovated the White House, but I think that was more to do with the decor and the furnishings, not the infrastructure,
Sure.
which Truman did. And yeah, yeah, it could literally just be. So it's been a while since the White House
Yeah, so
has had anything, and it's known to, it's known to need, every now and then
it's an
it's
old
falling
place.
apart. Yeah,
Right.
it's an old place.
Although, there's also people who think that, you can look at things that happen in the president's natal chart as things that, can be
Happened to the
applied
country.
to the whole
Yeah,
country. So the fact that it's happening in the 4th house might not just be literally relevant for his own place of residence, but for the country as a whole, and this potential sort of issue or crisis surrounding water. Um, and contaminated water or lack of access to water or the problems of too much water and not being able to contain it or filtering it, what have you. That's another kind of possibility as Mars makes that swing through Pisces and makes that contact with Saturn and eventually Neptune, which would even have Mars Neptune, that even gives rise to concerns about the dangers of like chemicals and other sort of poisonous types of things, because we saw when Mars was square Neptune, was retrograde and eventually stationed direct and square Neptune, we had all these train derailments, carrying very toxic chemicals. So these things are going to kind of escalate and continue to be issues as Saturn moves up towards Neptune, where we keep having to come back to this problem of the contamination of the waters and of the
right,
oceans, and
right.
etc. So that's what that's what I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
about when I
yeah.
see Mars, Saturn, Pisces.
Fair enough. Okay. Moving right along then. Let's see, where am I here? Yeah, just moving into May here. We'll look at this. It is worth sun's I do look at them. If you happen to be in a year, in your solar return, then the things that the sun does, oh, are you? Okay. All right. Well, then,
Yeah, I'm in a fast house Leo year. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, that's nice for you. I'm in a shitty Pisces year with Saturn and Pisces, and
oh no.
when I was in an Aquarius year, Saturn was in Aquarius, and then when I go into my Aries
Oh
year,
no,
Saturn will go into Aries.
yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm in one
I'm
of
very
those.
sorry about
I've been encountering clients who are in that same boat as well. That can happen, for a little stretch of time. Just
Yeah.
Saturn follows you from perfection year to perfection year. But good for you, Watson, being in a Leo perfection
Must
year.
be nice.
It must be nice, you fucking jerk. Show off. But yeah, the Sun-Uranus conjunction, just following Jupiter's conjunction to Uranus, while Venus is also in Taurus. Yeah, this kind of reminds me, like when we were looking at March. Excuse me. At March, and we saw all that stuff in Pisces, including Venus in Pisces, and we were, thinking about St. Patrick's Day and all that stuff when the sun was conjunct Neptune and Saturn's in Pisces and all that stuff. And then this is sort of another flavor of that, where we wind up getting this big stellium that involves the sun, Venus, and two big bad planets.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would be a great time for someone to release an album, especially if it's like, especially if it's music which is more kind of acoustic or wholesome, or this is like I think of Adele. Adele was born with Sun Jupiter conjunct in Taurus, and so she's kind of going through a Jupiter return in this part.
Music to cook dinner to.
This will be when this will be maybe when she's like cooking up her next album or something like that. It might be a sort of good creative time, perhaps, with Venus.
I wonder if we're not in for some kind of new development in food. Are we going to finally start eating like laboratory created meat that they've been threatening to do, or are we going to finally start eating the cockroaches that we were supposed to
remember that as Jupiter is already co-present with Uranus and Taurus, one of the things that I wrote about like back in like 2017, I think, I read this article about like things we can expect from Uranus and Taurus, and one of them was lab grown meat. And I actually, as Jupiter has been in Taurus not conjunct Uranus, but co-present with Uranus, I believe that the FDA in the United States, at least, has approved lab grown meat to be bought and sold. So it would be interesting if this is potentially when a revolutionary food product is launched.
Yeah, it turns up in supermarkets. Yeah. Get your.
I mean, I know they already have like Impossible meats and stuff, but like
but literal like
stuff.
Like actual
deathless
meat. Yeah, deathless meat. Could be. Okay. So that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Shortly after that,
also 3D printed foods, I would think would be
yeah,
kind of another possibility.
All that kind of thing. And then this is the companion transit when Venus reaches Uranus just a few days later.
Right.
We see a different view of that stellium. And
the guy who created 3D printers, his name is Chuck Hull, and he was born at a Sun-Uranus conjunction in Taurus.
Oh,
and he's approaching his Uranus return. And this is why I've kind of been saying, like, I think 3D printing is going to really become a much more accessible thing. And it's right now it's kind of still like a niche hobby, it's more of a hobby, it's more of a novelty. But I think eventually we'll see like, Kinkos. We'll see like the Kinkos of 3D printing, and eventually we'll see like the 3D printer in your home that everyone has, and you just print up your meals and you print up various consumer goods.
Like Star Trek.
You just manufacture your own stuff, manufacture medicines, etc.
This
could be like a time where like these kinds of patents are filed.
Or when they surface in the culture, they become actual commodities.
Right.
What was I going to say? Oh, the other thing they're talking about using 3D printers for is actually building homes. For the
Right.
people who don't have houses yet. That's some. I mean, that seems like a really huge. But yeah, maybe
Yeah,
in
it's
the
like,
house,
move over, Jimmy
some
Carter.
kind of
let the
right.
let the robots handle it.
Right, right. Well, I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, Jimmy's made a hell of a contribution, but we can't count on him forever.
No, for sure.
We lost Rosalind this
Right.
past year, and it's likely just a matter of years, if not months or days, before Jimmy leaves us. So yeah, we're going to need something better to replace his efforts, and this could very well be it.
Right.
Okay. Moving right along. Oh yeah. And this is, I guess this is also, I'm just sort of looking at the different facets of this conjunction, at the same time that Venus is with Uranus, Sun comes to Jupiter in late Taurus, getting ready for Jupiter's ingress into Gemini at the end of May.
The problems of too much.
The problems of too much. Yeah. And this is, and then as the Sun moves into Gemini, then Venus comes to Jupiter just before Jupiter makes its ingress. Right. So now we're moving from Taurus into Gemini. Jupiter moves into Gemini, Mercury moves into Gemini, and then in early June we get a Sun-Venus exterior conjunction, the Blue 3 conjunction in Gemini. Now, for me, the immediate thing I think of now when it comes to this Sun-Venus conjunction in Gemini is it makes me think of Brexit, because it was during the last Blue 3 conjunction, around that time, that the Brexit vote happened. So that's one thing that comes to mind. I don't know if this is necessarily also Brexit related, although it would certainly be interesting if it was.
I tend to think of Brexit as the Mars retrograde that occurred in that time, because it was about splitting rather than joining. But
Sure.
one
Yeah.
thing to keep in mind too, and not that everything's about U.S. politics, and I hate to bring it back to that, especially for international watchers, but because of the regular cycle of Venus, it often turns out that the Blue 3, the Sun-Venus conjunction that occurs in Gemini now, that often is occurring at the end of the primary contest, where the nominee, while the nominations don't actually occur until you get to the nominating conventions, it's usually you're usually pretty sure, at that point that the candidates are who they're going to be. I remember in 2008, Obama officially became the presumed candidate at the Sun-Venus conjunction in Gemini of
Right.
2008. And so it often seems like that Sun-Venus conjunction is like when the new, leaders, the consensus starts to form around who is going to hold the title, who's going
Yeah.
to be kind of the nominee on either side. So
Right. Like this is Kennedy's nomination in 1960, and you can see it was shortly after the Blue 3 conjunction. You're absolutely right. The Blue 3 and the Red 3, every 4 years, this sort of pre-election convention period always coincides with a Blue 3 or a Red 3, and that's interesting in and of itself.
right.
This is why, like, the Watergate break-in was during a Red 3, during a Venus retrograde in Gemini, because that was
Changes of consensus, right?
yeah,
It changes
exactly.
what you think about
Exactly.
who's in charge. So naturally, if you had, like, say, your Sun in Gemini and a Sun-Venus conjunction occurs close to your Sun, would that say anything about your chances potentially of being selected as a new standard bearer?
Yeah, I mean,
For
I
your
see what
party, yeah.
I see what you're getting at, and this does actually bring us into, we are going to talk about the conventions, which we're almost there. In fact, I might as well take us there, because that does the Republican convention. See, now the Democratic convention used to happen earlier, but now the Democratic convention happens at the end of August. Indeed, I was born during a Blue 3 in August of 1968 in the famous Chicago Democratic Convention that occurred, less than 2 weeks after I was born. Also part of the Blue 3 cycle. But this time that the Republican National Convention is the one that happens first. I don't think it always happened first. I think it used to be the Democratic that happened first. I think they've kind of switched it up. But yeah, this is the Republican National Convention. Now we have Mars, Uranus in Taurus, which I know, we definitely want to focus on. Saturn is only just recently stationed retrograde. So there's also Saturn's making a phasis. Jupiter's going to be squaring that Saturn very soon. I mean, you can argue it already is.
Sure.
And yeah, Mars Uranus at the Republican National Convention.
Right.
I'm sure this is going to be, a totally smooth, friendly affair where
So
the candidate swears, to act on behalf of all humanity in the best interests of, planet Earth.
So when I first
No,
saw
sorry. Go ahead.
when I first saw this chart, I pretty much jumped out of my seat because, if you want to bring the other chart up that's relevant to this event, Nick.
Which one? The Democratic?
This has no. The Mars-Uranus conjunction. So a previous time we saw a Mars-Uranus conjunction.
Oh, yes. Was
January 6th, 2021. Which was the date of the insurrection, the attempted coup, on the United States Capitol. So in that time, I think it's important to think about Mars being not just kind of unbound because it's conjunct Uranus, but also the fact that Mars is in its opposite sign of Taurus. Now we know that Mars actually entered Taurus on the day of the insurrection, and
Right.
this is happening as the image of a man with bullhorns, is like leading the charge, the so-called QAnon shaman, so he's like leading this charge of this charge into the United States Capitol. And so what's interesting about this, I think, is not just that Mars is conjunct Uranus, and this is like kind of a crazy martial event, but also that Mars is in Taurus, because the actual aim of that insurrection was to hang Mike Pence, right? They wanted to kill Mike Pence because he was, trying to fulfill his constitutional obligation to certify the election result,
Right.
and
treat Nancy
right, yeah, well, yeah, so.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that like Mars in Taurus is supposed to be kind of like against itself. And so this is interesting because it wasn't just anti-progressive, it was also anti-conservative, it was anti the conservative establishment politicians. They were going after Mike Pence, like that, right, who you ostensibly think that's who they would like be in favor of being in there, is Trump's vice president. But it was it's Mars against itself, being in its opposite sign, and in a very extreme and unusual way because of its conjunction with Uranus. So the fact that Mars is going to be back with Uranus at the time of the Republican National Convention would make me think that we would see some similar dynamics of the of this great feeling of like rage, and not just directed against Democrats, but against the Republican establishment.
Yeah.
A Mars kind of a war with itself. And
right. And there has been, just to interject, there has been a Mars-Uranus conjunction in between the January 6th insurrection and this coming one. And that was in August of 2022, just before Mar-a-Lago was raided. And this also sparked a big sort of pushback from Trump's people.
Right. Yeah. They saw this as evidence of, the so-called deep state and its, agenda to, deny Trump what is owed to him,
right?
Or something like
because
that.
we all have Trump arrangements that it.
Right. Yeah. So, this is very
condition.
Right. This is interesting too, because you can see how Saturn in a square placement to Mars and Uranus sort of showed this was like this was comparatively squashed, compared to 2021 where Saturn was not there, and this is something that like went way further, than anyone would suspect. And in this case, it's like actually, that Mars-Uranus force being kind of held
Saturn
back. Oh, right, yeah. What am I saying?
From Jupiter-Saturn.
I guess Jupiter was also encouraging.
But
Maybe Jupiter was the issue.
Look, the Saturn-Uranus square that went from 2022, I mean, it was absolutely about, this stuff, but it was also about, how COVID, Saturn square Uranus, um, and it was square between 2020 and 2022. It wasn't men against women, or against straight, black against white, none of the classic. It was mask against anti-mask, vax against anti-vax, and there's people in any of those other factions. Yeah.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not correcting you. I think you were. It sounded like you were making fun of the way I said it.
No, I wasn't. My accent closer to yours than mine, so I'm always hearing people say Mars.
Okay. Gotcha.
All day long, everyone's Mars. Yeah, I'm the only one who goes masks, but now they're living in my continent. They have to learn how to do it. Anyway, long story short, yes, Saturn square Uranus often does this, just creates this new division in society that may not have even existed before, which is, the whole COVID experience in a nutshell. It really sort of juggled around some of, there were some people who thought they were left wing suddenly realized they were right, and so and vice versa. You know what I mean? Or that they,
right,
somehow found themselves in the camp that they didn't agree with. A lot of people were sort of,
it kind of reshuffled the deck.
Yeah, it did reshuffle the deck very much. So classic Saturn Uranus in that sense. So coming back to the Republican National Convention and the fact that we're getting this conjunction again. You don't really need to be an astrologer necessarily to anticipate this being a really sort of volatile, crazy time. I'm sure the featured speaker will have all kinds of really interesting things to say.
Do you mind throwing this chart up against Trump's?
Yeah, sure. I guess we got to go there.
You'll see that Mars-Uranus conjunction ends up falling very close to his midheaven. So this is an even more pivotal Mars-Uranus conjunction than even 2021 and 2022. It is, as you can see, exceedingly close to the.
Yeah, there we are. Square is natal Mars. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is very. It looks terrible. I also think it's funny when you consider the Mercury, because Mercury is about speeches, right? And that's primarily what happens at political conventions. Yeah. But you can see that Mars is going to be moving towards this ongoing square to Mars and Uranus over the days of the convention.
Yeah.
So the tenor of the speech, will be especially pitched and very combative and aggressive, and we'll feature all of this kind of alarming sort of rhetoric that perfectly aligns with Trump's kind of style, I guess.
Right. And Mercury is just 20 days from its retrograde station at this point when the convention begins. So there's also Mercury is already just 2 degrees shy of its direct station degree in a month's time. So we're already in the middle of this sort of chaotic period that
right.
Yeah, will resonate over the course of the next few weeks, as they always do when this guy's involved.
Right. Interestingly, the 2024 convention, that is that's the day it starts. It ends on the 19th, I believe.
Right. Yes.
So interestingly, Mars-Uranus is most closely conjunct on the first day of the convention, but it begins to separate over the course. So I don't know if that just means that the first day would be especially outrageous and that they would somehow subside. I kind of don't imagine that would be the case, but it is quite interesting if you consider that on the final night of the convention, the moon will be in the last third of Sagittarius. And of course, you can see that the last third of Sagittarius is where Trump's own natal moon is. And so,
and a lunar eclipse moon at that.
Yeah, lunar eclipse moon at that. So
Also,
it's hard not to see how that.
Yeah. The sun is on his Saturn when it begins, and he's in an Aquarius perfection year.
Mm-hmm.
So even just the function to his Saturn and the Mars-Uranus square his Mars makes me think that even though it's like, basically grandfathering him into the nomination, that he's not very happy on this day, which isn't like not a not a huge statement to make. He rarely seems happy, but he looks particularly disgruntled, even though this should be a day that he's, reasonably content. He's with his people. He's given his big speech, but it really looks malevolent in a way, like he is not pleased.
But also keep in mind that by the end of the convention, the sun will be closer to his Venus, and
No, for sure,
So I think it's interesting because it's almost like in the beginning he's kind of like sidelined, like kept away, but then there's this like outrage on the first day with Mars Uranus, but then somehow, I mean, it's hard not to imagine that this somehow it does look like he is a big part of this, and the only reason that would make sense is if that is when he is confirmed as the nominee, against all sense.
Yeah, I meant at the start of it, he doesn't look pleased. Yeah, no, I think over the course of it, he's doing fine. I don't think it's gonna like totally undermine his project, but yeah, when it starts, it looks like he's not happy. Mm-hmm. Okay, moving right along. Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, then the next Mercury retrograde station happens at the beginning of August at 4 degrees of Virgo, and it's going to wander back into Leo. And this becomes important for a few reasons, because we are leading up to the Democratic Convention. The other thing that happens on my birthday, on my 56th birthday, I'm going to have Mars conjunct Jupiter in my solar return. Squared by Saturn. And this
no.
I know. As if life isn't hard enough already. This is why you folks need to like send us money on Patreon. So, to help me through whatever it is I'm going to be suffering
through his whatever that Saturn square.
Whatever problems I'm having at this time, I'm sure they can be solved with money. So
hopefully.
All right. So this takes us to the Democratic National Convention on August 19th. So Mars and Jupiter still very closely squared. Mercury still retrograde, having just made its internal conjunction with the interior conjunction with the Sun. Pluto heading back into Capricorn for one last time, but not quite there yet. And Saturn squaring this in a T square. So we have Saturn, Venus, Mars, Jupiter. And this is really, so Patrick, you and I were talking about this before the live stream, but we should let our listeners in on just how spectacularly unusual this is.
Yeah, this is very unusual. It's kind of deceptive because it doesn't necessarily immediately strike you as being a particularly rare arrangement, but when you search for this kind of conjunction, it has only happened a handful of times since 1000 BCE. Like literally like 3 times, and in different signs too. It's like and not even that as close as this one is. This is really unusual because it is a simultaneous square between both benefics and both malefics, while Mars and Jupiter
also had an opposite. It's a whole crazy.
So you have this major. So and what's crazy too is the exact days of the DNC kind of span some of the exact hits of these planets to each other. It's a very complicated arrangement to interpret because I mean you could try to use the doctrine of like overcoming aspects to try to interpret this, but then you also have to take into account the way that planets can be bona fide or maltreated or enclosed by the malefics, enclosed by the benefics, and you get multiple chains of planets hurling rays while some are still being afflicted by superior squares. It's just extremely complicated to untangle, and from day to day, whether or not Mars is good, or whether or not like Jupiter is great, or whether or not Venus is good or not, sort of changes from hour to hour, like within the time frame of the convention itself. And so I've been having a lot of difficulty with being able to just concisely summarize what the nature of this should be. But the closest that I can get is to say that because of this intermingling of the benefics and the malefics, we would really see something akin to like friendly fire, where you have these sort of divisions and uneasy kind of alliance of people who aren't normally friends and people who are normally friends who are on opposite sides of things. And we can kind of maybe even guess at what this could be. We know that like the obviously the current war and going on between like Israel and Palestine has really splintered the left, because you have a lot of people who are very pro-Israel and others who are very pro-Palestine, and that's affected the left, I think, even more so than it has on the right. So these,
big time. It's undermined Biden considerably.
Right. This is far, like, this is a extremely this is a very different situation that we can see, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
wild.
from the RNC. The RNC is all Mars, Uranus, and Mercury square Mars, Uranus, and all of that stuff. But for the DNC, it's really like this tense, delicate balance.
It's also like a full moon with Mercury retrograde square Uranus. So we've got two T-squares at once, and all of them look volatile. All of them look, the one we're talking about mainly is crazy enough, but then you throw in this thing and it's just, the Democratic National Convention to me looks like a capital S shit show. I think you're right. Like all kinds of switching allegiances. Who knows? Guest speaker Liz Cheney at a Democratic National Convention. It could be that nuts. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
George W. Bush coming to the DNC. Like,
exactly. Who knows?
It's like, what the hell are the neocons doing here? Like it. It would be really.
Dick and Liz used to mean rich, but the new Dick and Liz showing up at the DNC. Father and daughter day at the DNC.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Cheneys.
Right.
It could be, it's this crazy looking enough that,
Right. I mean, you'd have certain people sort of asking for restraint on certain things, and then other people sort of saying, no, like, go bold, kind of the classic incrementalist versus radical, kind of division, which, Mars Jupiter is very much like, let's go. But Venus-Saturn is like, no, we have to like reach out to people we're not normally, kind of affiliated with. And so it's.
And this does remind me of, I'm sorry, I didn't. It does remind me, speaking about sort of the 56-year gap. At the age, I'm going to have my 56th birthday before this. The thing about a fixed birthday is it's a sign of Venus return and no return. And 20th National Convention is happening pretty much at 56 solar burn, close enough to the famous 1968 Democratic National Convention, which, as we know, was not exactly the smoothest ride for everyone. This is, the Democratic National Convention is almost like mine, except I have the Sun in Leo and Mercury in Leo and the Moon in Taurus, but everything else is like basically mine. But most importantly, you see the Venus return and the nodal return, and this tends to be like a real sort of reckoning. There is definitely some sort of thematic connection between the two. Almost like some of the same people might be involved. People who were there in 68 might be there in 2024. I'm not sure who, I mean, a lot of
Right.
them are dead, but nonetheless.
It also occurs to me that Mars Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, that's going to be occurring pretty close to the degree of where the Sun will be conjunct Venus in Gemini.
Yes,
which is when we're assuming like that would be more or less when it becomes very clear like who the nominee would be based on who's won the most delegates at that time. Now the Democratic Party is slightly different though, because they have a system of super delegates where basically they can override they can override who really wins, because the party leaders can the super delegates can kind of swing the nominations one way or the other. And this I think this was done in the wake of the McGovern race,
right,
which was which year?
72.
Okay, so and 68, that was the one where that was where
68, the 68
LBJ had dropped out, and so it was like an open...
it was Hubert Humphrey, but the anti-war candidates wanted what's his name, Eugene McCarthy. So you had, because Hubert Humphrey had been LBJ's, or was still at that point LBJ's vice president, and so he was running in lieu of LBJ not running in the election. But the anti-war candidate people, particularly young hippies, wanted Eugene McCarthy, and so that's why they were clashing in the streets on this day in 1968. It was, a really contentious fight over which candidate to favor, and ultimately, it just made the DNC look bad, and it helped Nixon, win. I mean, it did contribute to Nixon winning for sure. Is that, people saw this craziness on TV.
Now, this is interesting because that looks like it was 1 month prior to the next eclipse in 1968.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's close enough to still be an eclipse. I don't know that. Yeah, the next new moon after the 2024 DNC would be in early Virgo, so it wouldn't be enough.
It wouldn't be. It's 2 weeks. Look, we're at a full moon here on August 19th. So early September.
So what you're saying is the 56-year thing is not just a Venus thing, which is relevant in terms of the elections in the US because of the Venus connection, but also eclipses because of the nodal connection.
The 56-year rule. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I've spoken about this before in other contexts, like both Hitler and Lincoln were 56 when their respective wars ended and their lives ended. It's like their whole life's purpose. And I'm not saying Lincoln is like Hitler or Hitler's like any. I'm just those are two examples. Also, the guy who was the president of Russia during the Russo-Turkish, Russo-Japanese War in 1905, a guy named Sergei Witte. He was he was a red one like Hitler, and Lincoln was like a black two who had a progress chart going to a red one, and all of them had at their 56th birthday. Okay, Lincoln won his war, but he got assassinated, and then Hitler and Witte lost their wars in like a really huge, humiliating way.
Wait a second. Kamala Harris was 56.
Yes,
in October of 2020, which would have been approximately when she would have been in the VP debate. In 2020, so that was
she turned 56 right like at that time, right? I mean,
right at that time. Right at that time. Now that we should probably look at Kamala Harris's chart with respect to the DNC chart, because I think I see a few things that
look,
make some sense in a way that looks significant. Like it's not just she is obviously a big part of this because she will be most likely renominated, but we can see part of this is this sort of ongoing transit of Saturn going through her 10th, but it's also going to be a Venus return for her, I believe.
Yeah.
Um,
Look at that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a Venus return. Jupiter and Mars will be right around her ascendant.
Yeah.
So she is definitely figuring into
Oh yeah.
this
She's in
the
the middle of
tension.
all of this. Yeah.
She's in the middle of all this and has to potentially navigate this somehow.
And she
let's see.
has a T-square of Mars, Jupiter, Saturn that, is not unlike the T-square, like it's a recurrence certainly of her Jupiter Mars
So
square. It's Mars Jupiter being configured, Saturn Mars being configured, Saturn Jupiter being configured. It's like all the same planets, and then Venus sitting right in the same place. So you're absolutely right. Good call on this. She's clearly like center stage in the middle of all this, but it doesn't look
weirdly
friendly.
Though, more so even than Biden, I would say.
Well, yeah.
Like this is highlighting her chart, not his.
Yeah.
So let's see. At this point, she would be 59 years old. She would be on the way towards her Gemini perfection year. So Venus would be the ruler of the year, and Venus is returning in the 4th. So it's the return of the ruler of the year to its own position. I mean, I would think in her chart that would be more favorable overall because Venus is the benefic of the sect in favor. Granted, it is in full, but it's still got something to give. Not to mention Taurus contains her ruler of the 10th house, so we can see why there would be a 10th house type of event in her 12th house year. Jupiter itself will be right around her ascendant. I mean, I gotta say, I think that looks fairly good, but it does look very different from the 2020 convention because at that point she would have been 55 in an 8th house year, highlighting Saturn, which was coming up to her natal Saturn, I believe.
No, that's too soon.
No,
Saturn,
it's too soon.
Saturn was still it was going into Aquarius right at that time, at that last election.
But it's still highlighting her Saturn, which is very close to her midheaven.
Sure.
That was kind of part of the story of that. So I'm not I mean, I wish I was able to say, I mean, it's weird because when I look at it from that perspective, it doesn't look bad.
I think it looks bad. She's in a Taurus perfection year, and Saturn is opposite her Venus on the Venus return. Yeah. So she's in the Taurus perfection year, and so like Saturn is opposing the Lord of the year, natally and by transit, and and like Uranus on the Jupiter. In the 12th, people with Jupiter in the 12th house are just they tend to land on their feet no matter what. They're not necessarily like the richest, most successful people, but no matter what happens, there's kind of like they land. And this doesn't mean she would win the election, but I think it does mean like she's got tremendous opposition, but that she's sort of an easy in anyway, and that's some of the that's some of what the contention's all about.
It's like everyone hating her, but she still kind of gets
exactly.
It anyway.
Yeah.
So
that's what the Jupiter does get the square from Saturn that, just like and literally again, it's a recurrence of Saturn square Jupiter. So I think she's got tremendous opposition, but she gets in anyway. That's how I would see it.
Although it makes me a little nervous that when she finally does turn 60 in October, then the ruler of the year turns to Mercury, which she has in the 6th. Now, while her Mercury actually has some strengths there by trying to the MC, it seems like it's in a less advantageous place than, say, her Venus. Her Venus would seem to be enough to like get her nominated, but like, will she win? That seems to be less certain.
I'm pretty certain, but
I mean,
you can feel free to not feel certain
without assuming anything.
Yeah, fair enough.
Can we look at Biden's just to see?
Yeah, let's put up Sleepy Joe.
Yeah. Now the big question mark. I have no idea who Trump would select as a VP. That it wouldn't be Pence because
Herschel Walker.
The whole trying to get him hanged thing might have burned that
Yeah, no,
bridge.
of course
So
it's not, but also he doesn't need Pence anymore, because the whole
right.
thing in 2016, like it was so that he would put judges that would strike down Roe v. Wade. But
Hmm.
that ship has sailed, and Trump is, not a bright guy, but he's bright enough to know, like, he does have political savvy. If he's harping on, the abortion thing again, that won't work in his favor. And he's already shown signs that he's not, he's, as we know, he's only committed to things that'll help him win. And, being anti-abortion helped him win in 2016. Being ambivalent about it in 2024 would be, the winning strategy. But this here is Biden's chart. So you can see the Venus-Saturn opposition straddles his midheaven IC axis.
So is he 81 at this point?
Yes, 81.
So that puts him in a 10th house year,
Mm-hmm.
which highlights Mercury as the ruler of the year, which is going retrograde at that point.
Right, over his node. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then Venus itself is transiting in the 10th, conjoining his midheaven around the time of now. What's interesting about that is when he was notified by the Obama team that they wanted him to be vice president, Mercury was conjunct Venus around 19 degrees of Virgo. So it has been a positive transit for him before to have Venus on the midheaven.
Right.
But it is happening amidst such crazy and awful conditions that it's sort of almost a similar deal as Kamala, where
that's just it.
She finds favor, but through
and look at his Mercury. His Mercury is at 21 Scorpio. Okay, the Lord of the Year is at 21 Scorpio. So it had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction opposite his Mercury a few months earlier before this, and now Uranus is about to station retrograde. It's square the Sun in the Mercury retrograde, and it's opposite his Sun Venus. It's almost like he's supposed to be the guy, but someone else, some other Uranian figure comes in and
opposes
him. Yeah. And so,
oh god.
So if he hasn't already, sort of stepped aside or been forced to step aside by this point, look, everything could be big. Like, is it Joe or is it Kamala? Shit show fest.
Yeah. Another thing.
The more I look at this, the more I would think that's what we've got on our hands.
Another thing that kind of worries me a little bit is when I look at where the nodes are, because if you look back at the transits in like mid to late October of 1987, when Biden
when you were born,
right, when I was born, yeah. Let me find the exact date. Biden had to drop out of the 1988 race in 1987.
I think I might have it. I thought it was, here we are.
He withdrew on September 24th, 1987.
I've got September 23rd.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's what I have.
So if you look at that date, you can see that's when he withdraws his presidential bid. And you can see that happened just like literally one day after a solar eclipse at 29 Virgo. Which happened in his 10th house, and with Mars on
which is
the midheaven.
And that eclipse at 29 Virgo is the same one that happened in 1968, shortly after the Chicago Democratic Convention.
That's right.
I know that because it was my progress chart at one point.
Okay, yeah. So, I see, I see that, we're going to be having these same kind of series of eclipses occurring across Pisces and Virgo as we go deeper into 2020. I believe the first one is like a lunar eclipse in Pisces around the time of the one of the debates. So I don't like the look of eclipses happening this close to his midheaven, because it's shown itself to be kind of a danger zone for him, because it sort of coincides with this previous time where he kind of loses status, and that happened really dramatically. He was running for president in 1987, and like within just a couple of months it was taken down because he
was caught
plagiarizing.
Plagiarizing.
Yeah, and
that was on the 17th. So yeah,
right,
like about a week before he wound up resigning.
Right. Well, the ruler of his 10th house is Mercury in Scorpio, so it's like,
right.
The pilfering other people's speech, ends up being something that causes him issues.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of other ways you can interpret that, but let's see though. There's been a few other eclipses that have occurred close to that point of his chart. What about? Oh, if you go to
2006, I guess would be one. Because that's 19 years after 1987.
Right.
Right. So yeah. if I go to
wait a sec.
What? Patrick's on a roll.
Okay. Wait. Go to October 21st, 2015.
October 21st, 2015. Oh, is this one of the debates?
No.
Oh, no, that's 2016.
This is the day, October 21st, 2015.
For Biden's chart? Like as a bi-wheel? Okay.
Yeah, as bi-wheel. So on October 21st, 2015, that was the day that Biden announced he would not run in the 2016 election.
Okay, and look at that. Yeah.
So this happened like 1 month after a solar eclipse that would have occurred really close to his midheaven. In fact, look, there's even Mars there back.
Yeah.
And Venus, weirdly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like Mars, Jupiter, and Venus in Virgo, his 10th, and this is happening. Like, when was the eclipse? When was the previous eclipse to that event?
To this?
Yeah.
In 2015, it would have been September 28th at 4 Aries, or September 13th at 20 Virgo. Is that the one you're looking for?
Well, yeah, basically, I was looking, I'm just looking at sort of similar eclipses. So we have a solar eclipse that occurs at the end of Virgo in September of 1987 when he drops out of the 1988 race. And then we have a solar eclipse occur at the end of Virgo in 2015 when he announces he's not going to run in the 2016 election.
Right.
And then we have this like next series of eclipses. Of course, this one's a little different because it's not actually happening in Virgo. It's happening in Libra, and there's like a lunar eclipse that occurs in Pisces. So it's a little, it's not like an exact analog, but it is pretty close. It is some of the same geometries, that are taking place.
My solar fire keeps wanting to post charts of Napoleon, which is next week's episode. But anyway, yeah. Okay.
So this is similar to October 2015. It's similar to October of 1987. There may even be other ones like, well, I guess 1997 or 1998, and then 2006 or so would be
2006. Yeah,
those would be other ones. Although that would be when the nodes are reversed. So,
well, the 2006 one would be like 1987. It'll be similar. It's on that 19-year track, as 1987 is 19 years after 1968. So those all sort of line up in that way. All right. Have we not talked enough about the DNC? I'm kind of
I
feel done. I feel like I feel really, really, really done. It's gonna be bad. We're gonna have to relive the whole thing 8 months from now.
I know.
All right. So closing out that month, like we've indicated, so Mercury stations direct at 21 Leo, and then shortly after that, Uranus stations retrograde at 27 Taurus, which I guess is like the last time Uranus will ever station retrograde in Taurus, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's kind of monumental. And Pluto is just getting ready shortly after that to make its regress into Capricorn, which happens
Very briefly.
just after the Uranus station. So yeah, that happens. The eclipses we've already just looked at. Jupiter stations retrograde at 21 Gemini in October, and this is going to be important, like foreshadowing. Pluto stations direct at 29 Capricorn on October 11th. So yeah, like you said, it's only briefly back in Capricorn in 2024, just for a short little stretch, but this is that period. Then it starts to move forward again. We get a Mars-Pluto opposition on November 3rd, just leading up to the election. Simultaneously, we have Venus opposite Jupiter, while Mars is opposite Pluto.
Well, and that happens, really close.
Yeah, and then the really, really close to where we're going here, which is the election.
So the thing that, when I first saw that Venus-Jupiter opposition, on the one hand, Jupiter will be very close to Trump's sun.
Yeah.
With Venus on his moon.
Yeah.
But that also is happening in Kamala's chart, like where it's on her ascendant.
Mm-hmm.
And
like, you really, really want Kamala to win. I respect
I'm not. I look.
I mean, I do. I mean, I don't want Trump to win.
I don't want Trump to win. Yeah, for sure. But the reason I bring this up, though, is like, if you didn't know anything about the situation and you were just to ask, like, which one of these two candidates looks like they're going to win, just based on the transits, it would be a little bit of a toss up, just because Jupiter, like, is a Venus-Jupiter alignment across a full moon's birth, is that better or worse than Venus-Jupiter across the ascendant and descendant axis?
Yeah.
One of those is more personal than the others. And so I think that it's weird, because even if, like, for whatever reason he wins, by he I mean Trump, there's some way in which I would still say that somehow this is, like, still advantageous.
Can I just
Kamala Harris?
I want to share a little bit of wisdom. My astrology teacher, Michael Luton, said to me back in 2000, when we were trying to predict the Bush v. Gore thing, which that we should have just realized, oh, Mercury's going to be retrograde. Who the hell knows? No one will ever know. But yeah, what he said to me in 2000, it's always stayed with me, because Al Gore has, like, he has Sun trine Moon, and Pluto was making a grand trine, transiting Pluto in Sagittarius, was making a grand trine to Al Gore's Sun and Moon. And I'm like, well, come on, this is like a winner's transit, right? And what Michael said to me in response was, when predicting a presidential election, look for whoever is having the shittier transits, because they're likely to win, because the presidency is a really hard job, and you're about to spend 4 years where you're going to age like 20 years in a short period of time, and the weight of the world is going to be on your shoulders. It's going to be hard. Whereas the person who loses the election, gets to go on speaking tours and make a lot of money, as their status is elevated, even though they lost the election.
That's really interesting, because I think about the fact that Saturn was on Trump's moon and square Trump's sun in 2016.
Right.
And here Saturn is going to be close to being square at that point.
Exactly. And but here's the thing. If Trump wins, like, the thing about Trump winning in 2024 is it saves him from jail. So it's a very different context than anyone else who has ever run for the position, because everyone else has run for, whatever their own reasons were, and they get those hard transits, and it is what it is. For Trump, this is like this election means the difference between, going down the hole or not. And so, so it's a very different.
At this point, Kamala is 60, and Mercury will be her ruler of the year, and Mars makes an ingress, directly squaring by superior square her Mercury.
Yeah.
Oh fuck.
Yeah.
um,
Look,
that's not
no,
cool. Okay, wait.
Look,
Put Trump up again. Oh
all right.
God.
I'll give you all the rope you need. I give the best hanging rope. No one
I
gives
mean,
you enough rope like I
I'm still,
do.
well, we're dealing with the future
This
here,
rope that I'm giving you is of indeterminate length.
Okay, so at this point, what's Trump's age? He will be 80,
He's 78.
78, pardon me. Okay, so that
He's in an
means,
Aquarius perfection year.
okay, so he's still in that, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So the ruler of the year is Saturn.
And Pluto has
Eighth,
left his perfected sign for just enough time
just
for
for
the
that
election.
briefly.
Just for that brief election, Pluto has left his perfected sign. Let's keep that in mind as well.
So the ruler of the year is Saturn, which is placed in his 12th, and that's been in effect even over this past year, which I thought was really interesting. He literally went to jail, right? He he got booked, you know, like he got his mugshot with his ruler of the year placed in his name.
My presidential candidate went to jail, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. All I got was this lousy T-shirt.
Oh my God! Okay,
available at donaldtrump.com.
Let me make sure I understand this. So Saturn, it's not really making any close aspects with anything in this chart except.
Well,
like,
it's still square. It's still squaring it's still squaring his Gemini Sagittarius stuff. Like,
right.
You don't need to get all zodiacal degree on us. It's still
Sure. The Saturn. Okay, so his natal Saturn is receiving, I don't know, a trine from Neptune, I guess, but that's kind of been ongoing. I mean, weirdly, it doesn't look that big of a deal, but I mean, it is. I mean, all right, so June. So if he's even a seventh house here, then if we even wanted to go like by monthlies, like he's roughly in a June, July, August, September, October,
like sixth house type of thing.
He's in a
fifth or sixth house. If you go by
June, July,
August, from the
October, yeah. So he's roughly in a Gemini monthly. So that highlights his sun, and that's where Jupiter is, and Mercury will be the ruler of that month. And Mercury
is in Sagittarius. It's fine.
In Sag. It's not like making any terrible aspects or anything.
It's not doing anything.
I mean, it's yeah, I hate it.
Yeah,
yeah, I really hate that.
I said it again recently. Talk podcast, but I'll say it again. Since the 2020 election, I have had one moment of doubt that Trump would. There's never. It's unshakable. I mean, I'll be thrilled if I'm wrong. I'll throw myself on my knees and beg you all for forgiveness and understanding. But no, I've not had a moment of doubt that he's going to be the next candidate. I've had that feeling since 2020. It seemed kind of ridiculous when I started saying it publicly last year. I said it. I more or less said it during the Uranus episode on the Astrology podcast. I've certainly said it to you a bunch of times on our live streams. I've gotten a lot of pushback over it, which I understand. Like it's a weird position to be in. But hold on. It's a weird position to be in. Because people will always suspect your sort of your motives, and of course, no one wants it to be true. But since I said it last year, it doesn't seem as unrealistic now as it did when I was saying it. Publicly first. So I'm already there. Okay. Like, just for the record, I'm already sitting in November 26, 2024, and he's won. And this is why I've been, reading a lot of books about him and putting a lot of charts in my database for him, because I want to be ready for the Trump presidency. For me, it's not like, of course, if it could be stopped, then do it. But I'm already sitting there. I'm already ready for it. And that's what I expect. That, be really well equipped as astrologers to really know his timeline, his astrology well. I mean, you know it. You already know it really well, but you need to know it even better than we do, because we're going to have 4 very interesting years.
Right.
Okay, that's that's
can we
for
look
better
at
or for worse.
yeah? Can we look at Biden? And
the
I'm
5
not.
stages, the 5 stages of grief kicking in.
No.
When do we?
Nick, that's not what I mean.
I just need to
I'm
look at
not
Biden
looking.
again, please. Just
I'm not looking. I'm not looking at it like that.
I
I
know.
just.
Okay.
I want to do a full accounting here.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm
So
sorry. I'm so sorry.
no, you're fine. No, you're fine. You're fine. So all right. At this point, he is still 82. Correct?
Yeah.
No. He's 81. He's
81. Yeah, he's
until
no.
20.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
So he's still in that Virgo year, and the ruler of the year has moved to Mercury, his ascendant.
Yeah.
And his natal Mercury is in the 12th, much like Trump's. And Mercury is not like receiving, well, it is getting that opposition from Uranus, so that's kind of ongoing. And
yeah,
Mercury goes retrograde in his first house.
Yeah, there's a whole after the election. There's a whole Uranus opposition theme going on for him all along.
Yeah.
And Uranus is
right.
That conjunction is, and to some degree, I think I think is more likely to be the candidate in November than Joe.
Well, I mean, I have wondered about that, especially given that the time of the convention seems to coincide with these times where it's not even like he lost an election; he dropped out. Like in 1987, exactly. He withdrew. In 2015, he declined to run. Like he opts not to do it.
Right. And he's magnanimous and strategic, whatever you want to say. But yeah.
Strategery. Now, it suddenly just occurred to me that same Mars, which squares Kamala Harris's Mercury on the night of the election, Mars revisits that square because it goes retrograde.
Yeah. Yes, it does. It goes retrograde very close to Joe's Pluto.
And the fact that Mercury goes retrograde in the aftermath of the election, it's almost like there's a democratic attempt to undo what happens.
Oh yeah. Like we'll have Democrats January 6, 2025. A whole wave of Democrats are storming the Capitol.
It's almost like Trump wins in some respect, like probably through electoral college again, even if it's not like a popular vote. I don't think he'd actually win the popular vote, but but there would be it's almost like there's some attempt to, with Mercury going retrograde through the first house. That would although that's only true though till the 20th, because after the 20th he turns 82. Venus becomes the ruler of the year, and Venus is more conciliatory and willing to kind of go along more with things. So Mercury contests. So Mercury, for some period of time in November, there would be some attempt to undo what was done or something. All
right, we're getting lost in the weeds here. I'm really
sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Mars retrograde though.
Yeah,
let's an important part, I think, of the post-election story.
It most certainly is. Shortly after the election, we have a Venus-Neptune square, and then Saturn stations direct in mid-November, right? This angle and everything. The Pluto ingress on November 19th, just before Joe's birthday. So now Trump's got Pluto in his perfected sign again. And of course, that Mars retrograde is imminent and is going to make an opposition to that Pluto. We get the Mercury retrograde station at 22 on November 25th. Again, as we were saying at the beginning of the program, this is where Mercury is now, as it's about to station direct. And then, station retrograde at 6 Leo on December 6th. And this ends the great ride of 2025, because as of this, okay, it is still 2024 at this point, but we get a whole series of transits between here and certainly the first half of 2025, and it just never lets up. It's intense. We get the Mars retrograde, followed by the Venus and Mercury retrogrades. That Venus retrograde in Aries that is always like, tumultuous, along with the Mercury retrograde, and then Saturn and Neptune, one after the other, find their way into Aries. And are essentially conjunct. The proper conjunct, the total zodiacal conjunction is in February of 26, but in my opinion, in May of 2025, Saturn and Neptune are as good as conjunct because they're less than a degree apart. Right. So I'm just going to take you through the clock here. So this is Mars stationing retrograde on December 6th. And as we go forward through the weeks, we get to the opposition to Pluto at the beginning of the year, and then it wanders into Cancer. The inauguration will be 2, 3 at 12. This is what the inauguration will look like. Right. There's that Sun Pluto we're talking about.
Taurus rising, the Sun Pluto on the 10th.
Right.
Saturn.
Right. And this is still Trump's perfected sign. And
right. It's true.
And he's being inaugurated.
The ruler of the first. Well, and that would have happened even the past time as well, but it wouldn't have been as ruler of the year.
He wouldn't have been in that perfected sign. But this is the 2016 presidency was, that was a comedy show. This is something else altogether. Trump 47 is not Trump 45. Trump 45 was largely comical and absurd and
it looks very scary.
Yeah, this one is something else entirely. I've been using the term white terror, which is not a racial term, but in the French and Russian revolutions, there were counter revolutions by conservative factions, and they were called the white terror. They were basically culling of left wing elements in government or military or what have you. And that's kind of and Trump's been saying all this stuff. It's not like I'm
right.
This is not a spoiler, but yeah, that's the term I have for this period. Is I think this is going to be Trump's white terror. Interesting. As you know, with presidential inaugurations, because they happen on this 4-year cycle, you always get one with Venus and Pisces here. Every second, like when Trump was inaugurated in 2017, this is where Venus was getting ready for its retrograde in Aries. But this time it's Venus with Saturn. So while this Venus is always here on every other presidential inauguration, it was there, for Obama's first inauguration. It was there for Bill Clinton's first inauguration, George W. Bush's first inauguration, Reagan's second inauguration, so on and so forth. Every other inauguration, you get Venus right about here. But this one's got the Saturn. So it's got this other gravitas to it,
That's interesting because that the Venus, when Venus was there in 2008, that was when Uranus was conjunct. And that was like
right.
Breakthrough candidate
in 2009. Yeah. In 2009.
And this one is Saturn. So I think this is like
that's a great point. Let's put up Obama's inauguration. Because that is quite the contrast, and especially because it's Saturn and Uranus, which are sort of like answers to each other. So this is Obama to January 20th, 2025 at 12, and so this is Obama on the inside. Sun in between Mercury and Jupiter, and Venus and Uranus opposite Saturn. And then, this is, and let's face it, the people who are voting for Trump are people who are voting against this. They're voting against Obama having been elected.
They're voting against the Venus-Uranus. They're taking it away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although it's interesting because if you look at the Saturn placement at the time Obama was inaugurated, that is roughly opposite where Saturn would be. Is literally the and if we think of the 11th house in an inauguration chart, I would assume that represents like Congress, right? That's the group of people that also have some role in the angular triad around the midheaven of the ninth is like the courts, the 10th is the executive, and the 11th is the congressional. So I think for Obama, he sort of he had like this great sort of support in some ways because of Venus-Uranus, but then this like strident opposition, led by people like McConnell, like with the opposition from Saturn. This time Venus is like conjunct Saturn in the 11th for the next president for 47.
Yeah.
And so
he's got no
that would tell us, that would tell us like, I mean, to some degree support because Venus is there, but it's always there. Saturn would seem to deny or squash or contract that kind of good favor from allies.
Yeah.
Or from Congress, which I mean, maybe that's comforting. I don't know. I mean, on the other hand, if we look at Venus, and its general connection with these like election phases, whether it's the nomination phase or the election phase, the inauguration phase, it's about like who favor is bestowed upon. So we might also think like Venus conjunct Saturn, that's like giving favor to whoever whatever Saturn is in society, and so it's weird because Saturn's like the last planet I'd ever associate with Trump. I mean, but
he's always angry. And he has a Venus-Saturn conjunction in his natal chart, so this is a recurrence.
Yeah.
I gotta. While Mars is actually on his natal Venus and Saturn. Over the course of this retrograde, so
he will be hated for sure. Like, this is duh.
Duh. But just to put him up with this, the same chart. And I'm sorry, I know, I'm sorry, everyone, that I'm saying this, but I'm only saying it because this is the astrologer's thing. This is
the astrologer's curse. Sometimes when you find out the future and it's not what you want.
No. So and remember,
oh man,
that whole T square during the DNC thing. That's where his Uranus is. The Venus and Saturn square his Uranus. There's that Venus-Saturn conjunction that he's having a recurrence for. There's the Mars retrograde on his natal Venus-Saturn. Yeah, look, this is him. I'm sorry, but this is him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Accepting.
I'm sorry, but it is.
I'm just processing all of this because I have looked at this before, but it's hard to it's hard, being objective about things.
No, I get it.
I'm not even saying I'm being objective right now, but but really just being able to talk it out, I think helps me understand it better. And so when I kind of, you're kind of seeing me in real time, kind of process this intellectually, emotionally, etc. But you are correct. That is a Venus-Saturn recurrence. Jupiter the 10th, Uranus on the midheaven. This is certainly a comeback story in many ways.
Yeah.
For a very Uranian character. But I feel like the final Uranian transit for him though wouldn't be until Uranus really enters Gemini.
But that'll be interesting. But that's it's ultimately, except for the very first few months when Uranus is on his midheaven already, except for the very first few months of this presidency, he will be a Uranus and Gemini president.
Now, I must say though, this does not look that good for him, despite some of the things that sort of superficially look good. Because ultimately, if you look at the ruler of the nearest to Saturn, retrograde Mars conjunction.
All I've predicted is that he's going to win the election and he's going to be inaugurated president. I by no means think like he's going to do great things or he's going to have a great time or it's going to be real. I don't think any of that stuff. I just think he's going to be the guy with his hand on a Bible or whatever on this, in this moment that we're looking at.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know. Let's all have a good cry.
Okay.
Let's all have a good
All
cry.
right. I'm gonna take a shot after this.
All right.
I won't even wait for St. Patrick's Day. I'll just go for it. Anyway, so what I thought was really fascinating is what you mentioned. Chris on the astrology podcast, he mentioned some of the research he done on like the 7 and 9 year cycle of Mars,
right.
And I think that's really, really illustrative for what the particular, like what the division actually represents with Mars retrograde. Because do you want to explain that for our viewers a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So a Mars. Should I share the screen? Well, I don't need to.
Sure.
Yet.
Okay.
The Mars synodic cycle is an unusual common. It involves alternate sums of 15 and 17. So the first Mars synodic return is 15 years. The next one is 17 years later at 32. The next one is 15 years later at 47. The next one is 17 years later at 64. And then the next one is 15 years later at 79. So 32 and 64, those are Mars synodic returns that coincide with the Venus synodic return, and that's something else entirely. And then 47 and 79 are the Mars returns in a human lifetime where Mars is closest to the sort of the natal position for the return. At 79, you get a simultaneous Mars and Mercury synodic return. So if I put up any chart here, I'll put up Trump's just because it's the one I have selected. Oh, I got to share the screen again, don't I? Don't want to get into those old habits where I would go on a big rant and then realize I hadn't shared the screen. Okay, so I hide this. And so I can do this. In fact, I'll do this with a few charts just to demonstrate. So I'm going to animate Trump's chart. I'm going to go to 79 years. So he's got Mars at 26 Leo. He's got Mercury at 8 Cancer. So if I go back 79 years to 1867, Mars is in Leo, Mercury's in Cancer. But if I go 79 years after he's born, which is incidentally June 14th, 2025, Mars is in Leo, Mercury's in Cancer. If you go back twice to 1788, Mars is in Leo, Mercury is in Cancer. If I go back another 17 years to 1709, Mars is in Leo, Mercury is in Cancer. You get it? Every 17 years, you'll get both those planets in there having a joint return at 79 years.
Yeah.
Okay. It's perpetual. It's magical. And so Chris asked me for a little help preparing the astrology podcast forecast episode. And I clued him in on this 79-year return because it goes back to 279 years ago, 279-year returns ago, lands us in, I think, 1866 or 67, I guess 66, as they are writing the 14th Amendment, the same one that people are trying to use to prevent Trump from running again.
That's the one that says if you've
participated in an
insurrection or against the United States, you don't get to hold office.
Right. So there's this double.
Also worth noting that a couple of states have actually, already
done it. Yeah, during a Mercury retrograde. So well done, folks. It'll be reversed in April at the next Mercury retrograde.
When the Supreme Court,
I mean, good try and everything, but way to do it during a Mercury retrograde, Colorado. And what was the other state? Maine. Yeah.
Although, California though decided not to.
Right.
Some other state decided not to
because it's apparently unconstitutional. So. Wait, someone is saying, who were we talking about when I said they would be elected president? Did you just tune in?
Maybe they just tuned in. Unfortunately,
okay. I'm saying Trump is going to win. Yeah. Heavy sighs. What can I tell you, Patrick?
So what I thought was really incredible about that is, doesn't that take us back to like 1787 and like the ratification of the
Yes.
Constitution itself,
Yes. Yeah.
and the division that was present at that time was basically getting all the states to agree to
Yes.
get the Constitution ratified.
Yeah. This is the signing of the Constitution, which later had to be ratified. It's interesting, when we're talking about like all of them ratified, all the states ratified the Constitution while Uranus was in Cancer, except for New York and Virginia, the two big states at the time, which did it when Uranus was in Leo. But this is the Constitution being signed September 17th, 1787. So you see Mars here at 2 degrees Cancer.
Oh, we need to share the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay. So, thank you. So this is the Constitution being signed in 1787. Mars at 2 Cancer, Mercury at 11 Virgo. So again, if I'm going to animate 79-year intervals, after 1787, 79 years later, we're in 1866, and that amendment is being written. The 14th Amendment is in the middle of being created. And then 79 years later, we're in 1945, and 79 years later, we're in 2024.
So these are roughly quadratures of the Pluto cycle as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's interesting because it's almost the exact same issue that's going to be, present, where the division will be between like the states that certify the results and those that don't.
Right. Or like, it's like voting to secede, right? I mean, it's sort of like it's all that all over again, all the different states sort of deciding for themselves how they feel about the present.
Right. Wow,
we're off to a great start with our brand new format and brand for the Astrology Livestream.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
This is a turd in the punch bowl, I'd say.
It's brutal, but I also think that I mean, probably best to be aware of this possibility, because I think it would be more helpful to prepare than it would be to be, hoping for something that might not happen. So that's that's really interesting. And we obviously, 2025 is so fascinating, especially that early period. I mean, that, like, the history books will write about. That is like a chapter like unto itself.
That is when the world changes, is those early months of 2025. That's when I expect the whole Russian thing to come to a head, China to come to a head. Remember, both Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have natal Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. Right. I think Chris and Austin might have mentioned that too. And the Venus retrograde in Aries, that red one, Venus retrograde in Aries. Many, like several Russian czars and mayors and other political figures have been assassinated during that Venus retrograde in Aries. The red one, right. it used to be in Taurus and before that Gemini, but the red one, Venus retrograde, has this insane history with Russian leaders. Even Stalin died during that retrograde. Right. I could just go on, and the whole course on Russian history you could do using that red one, Venus retrograde.
Well,
and then Saturn, Neptune also. Yeah. So
right, so to round out 2024, I guess, any advice or any way to wrap up?
I mean, ironically, even though I've sort of discouraged it with astrologers, like, I've been so sort of certain of Trump's victory that I've kind of rolled my eyes when someone wants to talk about, RFK or Marianne Williamson, not necessarily because, like, I'd like to see pretty much anyone win but Trump, I think. but it's just sort of I'm sitting on this. It'd be hilarious if I wind up being wrong. Then I've been supremely arrogant about all this, and I'll have to
I mean,
reflect. But
here's
it's I've lost my train of thought. Never
I'm
mind.
sorry. I was just gonna. Sorry, sorry for interrupting you, but I was just going to say that the only reason why I thought you might be wrong before is because, based on reading your book, Uranus USA,
Mhm.
I would have thought that, like, Trump's big moment would really be Uranus in Gemini, not Uranus in
Yeah.
Taurus.
Yeah,
And so
that's why I didn't predict him in 2016. I thought, well, this is too early. I mean, I knew his chart all along, and I was like,
by the same token, I would think, well, 2024 is also kind of too early still.
no, but no. 2024 is not too early because it makes its ingress into Gemini a few months into the presidency,
I
and
just
then
figured
yeah,
it
and
would
then
be the next
yeah,
one
no,
over.
it doesn't have to be that.
Um,
It's close enough to the ingress.
mhm.
I'm satisfied. Well, not satisfied. That's
I
the
know what you mean. Yeah,
wrong word to use.
I know what you mean.
Yes,
I
yeah.
mean, this is a yeah. It's well, for what it's worth. There's very few situations that there's not many people who have to go through the kind of emotions that astrologers do, because people are usually not don't have any assurance or any idea really that they may have an actual look into future events. So the kind of this process of like grieving a future that hasn't even happened yet is kind of it's not common. Not a huge part of the human
Yeah.
experience. Very few
Well,
people have
yeah.
to deal with this kind of emotional process of anticipating these kind of outcomes.
My position is just that rather than sort of fight. Well, I mean, I think this is what I was going to say before. Is even though I'm really quite convinced. I think like as citizens, I'm not an American citizen myself, but those of you listeners who are American citizens, I don't want to sort of like necessarily discourage you from contributing in your political process and doing what you can to aim things in a different way. But as an astrologer, I just think it's sort of the thing to do is like I said, be ready for November 5th, 6th. Of 2024, be prepared, knowledge wise, understand Trump's astrology better than we ever have before, really know the ins and outs so that as the presidency unfolds, we're well prepared to sort of to cope with whatever's coming up as astrologers.
You know, I, as an American citizen and resident, I think that as much as I hate the prospect of all of this, and I feel like this has been a completely sort of unnecessary like development in and completely unhelpful. I also recognize that the status quo hasn't exactly worked out either, and I'm not saying that that means people should, I don't know, just become nihilist and vote for Trump or something. I won't be voting for Trump, but however, I do think that there has to be some kind of catalyst for broader change in the United States for average people. And I'm not saying Trump will provide that. I'm saying that Trump may be the catalyst for
Yeah.
complete collapse of this system that would be necessary in order to rebuild something better that serves the people. And that Trump would be the ultimate failure really of this system, because once a system is degraded enough that it allows this kind of attitude and nonsense into power, once
Sure.
he's evidence of a bigger problem with this entire system. Systems that work don't let people like this through. We've clearly reached a point of just
Yeah. I mean,
degradation.
people like to say it's a self-correcting
Rebuilt.
system, and to some degree that has always played out, but it takes time. It's like science, things do go wrong for a little while, but the ultimate aim is to be, self-correcting.
So I guess I'm seeing this in the broader context of the Pluto return of the U.S. Constitution and kind of the really big renewal that this country would have to undergo through this Uranus and Gemini period. Because that's really, I really liked how you kind of identified or interpreted the Uranus returns in Gemini for the United States, that they were about these periods of redefinition where you define what the country will be. And, I don't think that presidents necessarily define, what the country will be. I think it will be people and
events like just, I mean, the last time Uranus was in Gemini, the US became a nuclear superpower. Roosevelt wasn't trying to make that happen. He just like, oh, the Germans might have this bomb. I better build one too.
So,
it all just kind of, these things are all larger than any.
It also, individual. And there was one other thing you mentioned in the book, which now actually gives me a little more hope. At the time, it made me feel uneasy, but you said that, Washington, Lincoln, and Roosevelt, these kind of the real the top three kind of big ones, they all kind of emerged out of these like Jupiter passages through Gemini while Uranus was in Gemini. And this is the first time that Uranus will be going through Gemini without that kind of saving grace of Jupiter.
That's a good point.
And that makes me think, though, and so at first that made me afraid, because I'm like, oh shit, that means like we don't have a Lincoln, in our back pocket that we can pull out to kind of save us from this. But
Kevin McCarthy,
but
Brett Kavanaugh's another Aquarius with the Mars.
The reason why this gives me a little more hope now is that, okay, well, maybe we don't define ourselves through a leader, that it really will be that it won't be like a Jupiterian figure that ushers us through this, but that it will be like the states, that will be the people, just average Americans who, aren't on board with empire and, with this like right wing tide. Like it will be like the good side, hopefully, that is able to prevail and set the terms for, what, this place can be, and that it doesn't have to be like a right wing, wet dream. Like, it can instead be like better place.
That right wing wet dream, or the white terror, as I called it, is a fleeting moment. It's a moment that I think is coming, but it's also a moment that goes. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this wouldn't be the first time, like after Lincoln's presidency, for the next few decades, the president didn't have a lot of clout. He really was just someone who sat around and nominated Supreme Court justices when it needed to happen. And, with a few other things here and there, but really not much. Teddy Roosevelt starts to change that. Teddy Roosevelt is the first president after Lincoln to really act as a like a leading executive,
or activist role in a way.
In a more activist role. And we've had, a variety of different presidents, but certainly he stepped up that game after a few decades of it not being the case, of presidents really being at the back end of the judicial and Congress departments. So that can resurface again. And certainly, look, the Revolutionary War was fought to overthrow a monarch, and so that might be what Uranus and Gemini is another fight to overthrow another monarch, if you will. It's often been remarked that I mean the U.S. presidency certainly is a kind of, insofar as you're electing a head of state, there is an element of you are electing a king as well as a president whenever you do. It's just not a hereditary role like it was in Europe.
Right.
But it's a very similar position.
Yeah. Wow.
Happy 2024, everyone.
I mean, I think while all of this stuff is, mostly unwelcome to most people, I do think that there are some good things to look forward to. This year.
Life is beautiful, and this is a phase we're going through, and I don't like the look of it, and there's going to be some ugliness, and some of us won't survive it, and that's all really daunting. But there's reason to be the positive. It could in the long run lead to better things all around. And while I've been discouraging about 2024, I by no means does that extend into the more distant future.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in the long term, I am more optimistic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
it-
but you're going to have to be because you're going to be living with Trump as a president again, and
well, and in general, going through the United States collective freakout, as it goes through Gemini, like
yeah,
that sort of regularly scheduled moment of where we have to step up to the plate. And it's so funny because and this is hopefully not going on too far of a tangent here, but how the Strauss and how um generation
yes, the
theory,
fourth
yeah,
turning, the fourth
fourth
turning, yeah,
turning, that's
yeah,
obviously like a Uranus thing. It's
yeah,
just so funny to me because the boomers, especially, I mean, there are boomers that I love, obviously, but
naturally,
generally speaking, the boomers have been pretty hard, I think, on the millennial generation. But according to that theory of the generations, it's really going to be the millennial generation that has to step up and
oh yeah,
be the ones to
oh
kind
yeah,
of reset things and
yep,
make them right, and in many ways functioning as this next iteration of the greatest generation, and what they call the greatest generation. And I think millennials in some ways are kind of like um the overlooked or underestimated generation. We're kind of taken to be a bunch of
avocado
advanced,
toast eating
yeah,
snowflakes. Yeah, I know.
but I think I think that millennials will occupy a much more critical role
Oh,
than is currently assumed, and will um have will be kind of I mean, not just in this current sort of like US political system, but I mean even thinking more globally about climate, and
yeah.
like how human life can even go on, like
Well,
beyond
you know,
these years. Like it's
you
going to
know,
be us that fixes things.
you do know that in the US, the millennial demographic is quite healthy, but that's not the case around the globe. In most cases, the millennial generation is significantly smaller in proportion to what the American millennial generation is. So you really do have um, like a tremendous sort of unique opportunity with that generation to make a tremendous political impact, both nationally in the United States and also internationally, insofar as being the global superpower. So
Well,
no, I think you're absolutely right.
1983 through 1989, especially because that's basically the Uranus and Sagittarius
Generation,
generation that will be experiencing the Uranus opposition
yeah,
during the time of the Uranus in Gemini uprising, or whatever that is.
exactly, yeah.
So I think that the the avocado toast eating snowflakes will have the
I
last
like
laugh.
avocado toast. I don't,
I like avocado
you know,
toast.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
Um,
didn't stop me from getting a house.
no,
Uh,
exactly.
but but that
You
is
because
at a
you cut
reasonable
down, you cut down on your avocado toast, and therefore you were able to squeeze in and buy a house. All right,
level.
I think we should wrap it up.
Okay, let's wrap
Um,
it up.
let's so where do we start with the wrapping up?
Uh, where can people find us?
The astrologylivestream.com, or go to youtube.com/slash the astrology livestream to subscribe to the channel. We have a Patreon. We have different tiers that you can, if you want to help us out. There's ways to give a little. There's ways to give a little bit more, and you get a little bit more. So please look into all that. The routine. The smash that button and hit that bell. And I
Smash
can't
that button to
smash that
subscribe and
button,
support us.
smash it, smash it, smash it. Um, all that stuff. We appreciate. We hope you enjoy the show. We do have a looser format still, even in our tight format, it's pretty loose, as you can see, because Nick and Patrick will always be Nick and Patrick, I think. That being said, I've had yes, T Dale says don't forget to give the guys a thumbs up before you go. Yes,
Oh,
please, the
thank you.
thumbs
That's
up.
very
Thank you,
nice.
thank you. Um, yeah, so next week we're doing Napoleon finally, right?
Yeah, we should be.
Yeah,
In general, our lives, our public live streams will be where we do like a monthly forecast ahead. or a deep dive into a particular biography or into a particular topic. And if you are giving at the $10 level on our Patreon, then you can also be there for our private live streams where we will be doing more like live Q&As, and we'll be offering more of a unfiltered commentary on current events.
This has been the filtered one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And on issues affecting the astrological community. And, so that's kind of, we'll be offering that as kind of a private benefit for people who are supporting us at that level. And then we're also offering, if you're going to be giving at the $15 level or above, we are also going to be having a monthly watch party. So if we're going to be selecting some films ahead of time, and the idea is we'll be able to watch them all together if you have Amazon Prime, and we can chat during the movie over live chat, and then after the movie we're going to meet up on Zoom and hang out and talk about some of the astrological themes and stories surrounding the directors or the actors or the movie itself or its production story, and have a good time. So if you are, you're spending your lonely Saturday nights alone, there will be people you can hang out with who have the same interests as you in astrology, and we'd love to see you there. So we'd love for people to join our watch parties by supporting us to that level on Patreon, because we love movies and love discussing them and love discussing the astrology of them. So we'd love for you guys to join us on that. So just addressing a comment that just came in from Pumpkin Spice.
I'm addressing it here.
Okay. They asked, was it streaming on YouTube because they didn't get any notifications going to Nick's and Patrick's channel, so there's nothing for the live tab. Yeah, this is streaming to our new YouTube channel, which is the Astrology Livestream. We made a new channel that we just put in the live chat there so that we didn't have to have duplicate accounts, duplicate copies of our live streams. We have just one central place now to go see. Wow, my hair is really crazy. So that this is kind of the new format we're kind of going with, and hope that this makes things easier for people to find us and to support us and to join in in our conversations together.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Those watch parties are going to be fun. There's all kinds of we want to look at the history of the film production, the directors or actors and what they're going through when they're making films, or sometimes the films will be about historical events that we want to talk about the astrology of. One way or the other, it's a good time is guaranteed for all. So do check that out. All right. So who are you, Watson?
I'm Patrick Watson. I'm an astrologer. You can find me and my work and services at patrickwatsonAstrology.com. And you can find me on most social media platforms at pwatsonastro.
All right. And I'm Nick Dagan Best. I can be found at nickdaganbestastrologer.com. And I'm Nick Dagan Best on all your social media stuff. And as we mentioned, we have our new website, theastrologylivestream.com, where you can sign up to be a Patreon supporter of various tiers, as we've just described. Please tune in every Sunday. Like I said, next week we're doing Napoleon. We're going to figure out what to do with our other episodes. There will be monthly forecasts, other deep dives into biographies and what have you. So stay tuned. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. I hope we haven't freaked you out too much. I hope this has been, I know all the astrologers are doing forecast episodes, so I hope this one has been, useful to you if you've been watching a lot of them. And we'll see you next Sunday.
See ya. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.